Good afternoon. My name is Oreen Chowdhury, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Committee of the Whole. I'm going to call to order our regular committee meeting for Tuesday, September 9th, 2025. Before we begin the meeting, I want to offer a friendly reminder to all members, staff, and the public that these meetings are broadcast live to enable greater public participation. These broadcasts include real-time captioning as a further method to increase accessibility of our proceedings to the community. Therefore, all speakers need to be mindful of the rate of their speech so that our captioners can fully capture and transcribe all comments for the broadcast. We ask all speakers to moderate their speed and clarity of their comments. At this time, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll to verify presence of a quorum.
Councilmember Payne.
Present.
Wansley is absent. Rainville.
Present.
Vitaw.
Present.
Ellison is absent. Osman.
Present.
Cashman.
Present.
Jenkins.
Present.
Chugtai.
Present.
Koski.
Present.
Palmisano.
Present.
Vice Chair Chowdhury.
Present.
Chair Chavez.
Present.
There are 11 members present.
Let the record reflect we have a quorum. Today, we will begin with reports of our standing committees before we take up our agenda. We will begin with the Administration and Enterprise Oversight Committee chaired by Councilmember Wansley. Oh, never mind. We will go to the Vice Chair, Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. She might walk in any moment here. The Administration and Enterprise Oversight Committee is bringing forward 25 items this cycle. The first is the Surveillance Technology Contracts Ordinance. The next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Items 2 through 8 are all gift acceptances for things like registration, transportation, and lodging for different city staff, for professional organization meetings. Item number 9 is a contract with Karen Scow doing business as Access Resource for real-time video captioning services. Item number 10 is a contract for ERP planning. Item number 11 is a contract with CUNY on behalf of John Jay College for technical assistance providers for our group violence intervention program. Item number 12 is a contract with Cornerstone Advocacy to operate a 48-hour domestic violence crisis hotline. Item number 13 is a contract with Darcy Loma for newly elected orientation for 4 years. This item was sent forward without a recommendation. Item number 14 is a utility easement agreement with Northern States Power. Item 15 is a contract amendment with Group Health Plan and Summit Orthopedics for pre-employment testing and occupational health services. Item 16 is a contract amendment with Sheehy for Royalston Roofing and Skylight Repair. Item 17 is a contract amendment with Short Elliott Hendrickson for the Nicollet Avenue Bridge over Minnehaha Creek Rehab Project. Item number 18 is a contract amendment with Stantec for engineering and design of Upper Harbor Terminal. Item 19 is a contract amendment with Hillcrest for Public Works parking. Item number 20 is a bid for the Federal Courthouse Parking Ramp Security Improvements Project. Item number 21 is the bid for alley snow plowing. Item number 22 is public towing services for 2 of our zones. Item number 23 is a Minneapolis Convention Center upgrade to the art wall lighting. Item number 24 is election judge and deputy city clerk appointments for the upcoming election. And item number 25 is a workers' comp claim. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. And we also have the chair back, I want to note.
Yes, we'll recognize Councilmember Wansley to the meeting. And then we do have a couple speakers in queue. Councilmember Cashman.
Thanks, Vice Chair Chowdhury. I wanted to pull the ABM Industry Group's parking services contract.
We will
for a
actually
separate
be
discussion.
taking that up in our discussion today
Great.
on item number 5. And same with item number 6 from AO and a couple other items.
Wonderful.
Madam Chair, I just want to point out, I believe it's because we lost microphone service at the actual committee, so we weren't able to properly consider those and forward them for approval, but it's just because we haven't been able to talk about those in public yet.
Thank you. And I will also note for other members and the public, we will also be taking up items from the Public Health and Safety Committee and the Intergovernmental Relations Committee as an addendum due to technical difficulties. Councilmember Osman?
Yes, I have a question about the violent interrupters, and
That will also be in our discussion.
okay, is it on
Item
discussion?
number 6.
Gotcha, thank you.
Yes. Awesome. Anybody else? Great. We will next go to budget. The report will be presented by its chair, Council Vice President Chugtai.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Budget Committee is bringing forward one item on Thursday for the body's approval, which is adopting findings, approving the establishment of, and approving the salary schedule for an appointed position in the 311 Service Center Department of Deputy Director 311 Service Center. I will stand for any questions.
There are no questions. We will next go to the Business, Housing, and Zoning Committee, presented by Councilmember Osman.
Thank you, Vice Chair. The Business Committee will be bringing 19 items to this week's City Council meeting. Item 1 through 3 are liquor license for Broder, North Star Deli, and Minneapolis Motor Mart. Item 4 is approving the 2025 license fee schedule. Item 5 is liquor license approvals. Item 6 is liquor license renewals. Item 7 is gambling license approvals. Item 8 is gambling license renewals. Item 9 is a street name change application submitted by Councilmember Chowdhury to change the street name to Edmund Boulevard between 32nd Street East and 42nd Street East, between 44th Street East and 46th Street East to Lena Smith Boulevard. Item 10 is a new American Workforce Services grant for employment and training services. Item 11 is a Family Housing Fund Board of Directors appointment. Item 12 is approving the local historic landmark designated to the Nelson House located at 2620 8th Avenue North. Item 13 is an update of administrative fine schedule. Item 14 is certified local government grant for Preserve MN 2025 conference. Item 15 is 2025 Hennepin County Transit Oriented Community Award and authorization to multi-jurisdictional agreement. Item 16 is the rescue effect of campaign grant for adoption fee waivers. Item 17 is the zoning map correction ordinance. Item 18 is returning to the Shoreland Overlay District mapping ordinance. Item 19 is comprehensive plan amend related to the minimum height flexibility. With that, I will stand for any questions. Thank you.
There are no questions. We will next go to Climate and Infrastructure Committee and hear the report from its chair, Councilmember Cashman.
Thank you, Vice Chair Chowdhury. The Climate and Infrastructure Committee is bringing forward 7 items. Item 1 is approving appointments to the Shingle Creek Watershed Management Commission. Item 2 is approving appointments to the Bassett Creek Watershed Management Commission. Item 3 is a resolution adopting revisions to the snowbound cart policy. Item 4 is approving a resolution related to the Lowry Avenue Southeast Street project. Item 5 is approving the concept layout for the 18th Avenue South Bridge project. Item 6 is approving the concept layout for 9th and 10th Street Corridor Improvement Project. Item 7 is approving the concept layout for Park Ave and Portland Avenue safety improvements. And I'll stand for questions.
There are no questions. We'll next go to the Intergovernmental Relations Committee and hear the report from its Vice Chair, Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Intergovernmental Relations Committee is bringing forward one item for approval. The Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport Noise Oversight Committee appointment, and that is approving the appointment of Lauren Olson as alternate to the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport Noise Oversight Committee for a 2-year term beginning June 26, 2025 and ending June 25th, 2027. Madam Chair, I will note that due to technical difficulties, we have 3 items from this morning's September 9th IGR committee that were referred to the Committee of the Whole. I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. And then we would typically go to Public Health and Safety Committee, but due to the technical issues at this cycle's committee, items from that meeting were either postponed or referred to this meeting, so there is no formal report from the Public Health and Safety Committee. With that, our first 4 items on the agenda are consent items from last week's Public Health and Safety Committee, which, again, could not meet due to those technical issues. Item number 1 is accepting a grant to purchase clip-on single gas monitors for the fire department. Item number 2 is approving a legislative directive related to case clearance rates. Item number 3 is approving a legislative directive related to impervious surfaces authored by Councilmember Wansley. Regarding this item, I'll note that Councilmember Wansley has a revised version of this directive in front of us today. And finally, item number 4 is receiving and filing 2 external appointments to the Public Health Advisory Committee. With that, are there any questions or discussions from committee members? I will recognize Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Chowdhury. As you noted, I just want to give context for item number 3, which is the impervious surfaces legislative motion. Of course, you highlighted that I'm bringing a substitute, which is included in the limbs file, and that is technically before council members. This version was based off of feedback we received from staff and expands on the original question regarding environmental concerns tied to impervious surfaces. And since this will not come back until 2026. We have noted that it should return to the proper committee that will be designated at that time, since we don't know what that will be, as next council gets to shape the subjects of, committees. So with that, I will ask for a second for that motion to amend.
Second.
Great, thank you. That has been motioned and seconded. We will go to Councilmember Cashman.
Thank you. I wanted to note the police department case clearance rates legislative directive that I'm bringing this cycle. We've been working on it for quite some time and going back and forth on a date. And ultimately on Thursday, I'll be bringing a version with a date at the end of October for us to understand this information. It's really important that we have information on our investigations and case clearance in time for our budget proceedings so that we can make decisions with the data in front of us. And I'm really interested in creating a culture of accountability around investigations in the city. We know that someone is less likely to break the law if they know they'll get caught, and that only happens if we have effective investigations and case clearance. I've seen how timely investigations can break the cycle of retaliatory violence, and while, on the other hand, repeated unsolved cases can erode the public's trust in our city's public safety system. So we do have a lot of data published on the city dashboards around crime and other public safety topics, but we do not have data published on investigations and clearance rates and how we're actually solving crime. So that's why I'm asking for this data to come before the council, and again, to have this information in a timely way so that we can use it to make decisions about our public safety budget for 2026. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, I will move approval of the consent agenda on that motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. No, any abstentions? The ayes have it, and the motion has carried. Now we will go to the discussion portion of our agenda. Items 5, 6, and 7 are all from last week's AEO committee. The first item is a contract agreement with ABM Parking Services for a municipal parking system. I believe that some of my colleagues had some questions and comments. If they would like to get back into queue for that, that'd be helpful. Councilmember Cashman.
Thank you, Vice Chair. This contract is for professional management services for our municipal parking system. It's up to $182 million for a 5-year period. So that's up to $33 million a year. So the high number on this budget line is what initially caught my attention, and was able to have a good meeting with Public Works on the topic, and they have since sent over a memo that answers some questions of what's involved in this contract. So that is now up on LIMS for you to view as well. So a few things that I was struck by. This contract includes the DID assessment that the city pays for our parking ramps. I wasn't originally aware that public buildings do pay into that assessment, so that was interesting to learn. And then nearly $1 million annually in off-duty police time that our parking contract is paying for, which I think, better traffic control or the private security firm that we already work with should be doing this work. And then I also note that we used to transfer about $10 million annually from our parking revenue to the general fund to lower property taxes, and that has depleted in recent years. So I believe that we're not managing these contracts as effectively and efficiently as we could to be supporting our city budget. Furthermore, I'm just concerned that the council isn't able to weigh in at the point of RFPs for these types of contracts, and rather we get this information once the contract negotiations have happened, and it kind of puts us in this sticky situation where I know that they need to pass a contract in order to maintain levels of service by October 1st, but there's not much time for us to have these conversations. So I wanted to bring this to the council's attention because we're in a tough budget year, and I'm really concerned with this amount of spending on this service. I wanted to note that Councilmember Palmisano and I are working on a staff direction to our policy research team to look at how other cities are managing their parking assets in a post-COVID world and what Minneapolis could be doing to better manage these assets and bring in more revenue to lower our taxes. And then I also would like to ask that our Public Works bring back a revised version of this contract with a shorter duration, because committing to 3 to 5 years at this level does seem irresponsible at this time, and I'd be much more comfortable passing a 1-year version of this contract so that our research can actually inform how we proceed in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cashman. We'll go to Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Chowdhury. First, I do want to thank Councilmember Cashman for following up on this item and getting more information around the full cost related to this contract. As Councilmember Cashman also noted, I think it's important for our colleagues to know that the memo that was attached to this item did highlight a significant cost related to off-duty work here, in which the city pays for, essentially increasing taxpayers' costs related to off-duty. And I was really shocked by the lack of concern or the overlooking of this by the administration, especially since there's already a $1.1 million cost annually that taxpayers subsidize at the city that's related to off-duty. And in this contract, they would be essentially receiving $1.1 million to essentially manage traffic on the street. As Councilmember Cashman highlighted, I would like to know why we can't explore the integration of traffic control to do the similar function. And they're also being paid to provide security in skyways. And this just seems very much like a financial oversight, somewhat financial poor planning on the city's part. And I don't believe I'm alone in wanting more time to understand how this total came to be, how off-duty was integrated into this, and as Councilmember Cashman highlighted, also being able to address potential pathways of modifying this contract so that we can have some time to address immediate and urgent concerns in the meantime, while also looking at other options we can pursue in the long term, because once or should we pass this contract, this locks us into a binding agreement with this vendor for 3 years, which basically takes that alternative, pathway off the table. So with that said, I actually would like to refer this item back to committee for additional conversation with staff that can hopefully get us to a place where we can have something before us that is amendable and supported by a number of us on this body. And with that, I'll ask for a second.
Second.
That has been moved and seconded. We will then go to Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I wanted to point out that in conversation with Councilmember Cashman and in a memo she sent to myself and the chair, she's asking a very big question here that deserves to be looked at, broadly speaking, about the future of our parking assets and how they're used in a post-COVID environment, and how that is changing. That's why I offered to assist her with a policy and research division request, which I rarely do on our legislative side. I have it in front of me. It's not 100% ready to go, but I think it will end up also as part of AEO next week. Just briefly, it covers, a national landscape analysis of parking management practices in comparable municipalities. It's about the available research on the future of parking demand downtown in other cities and in ours. And it is about identifying potential opportunities in our parking management practices. That's a pretty broad brush. And I think that that's perhaps due. But in terms of this contract that's before us today, that ends October 1st. And some of the things that were pointed out, like the city's downtown improvement district assessment, yes, we keep ourselves accountable to our own policies. In this case, what I assume frontage of the downtown district within an improvement district that we have put in place and control. Second, I think that traffic control agents or other kinds of security are probably very real possibilities here. I'd keep in mind that traffic control agents can't access some of the additional information about vehicles that a sworn officer can. That might help with public safety downtown. I really do appreciate Councilmember Cashman's point that council ends up backed into a corner on contracts based on start dates. And could we have a different way of doing this and be more proactive on more things in the future? But to that end, with this contract, I have a couple of questions for Public Works. And one of them is, it is my understanding we would not at this point in time be able to do a shorter term. So is it possible for us to do a shorter term? That is part of the RFP, in my understanding. And renewals or extensions here are always at city discretion. But I don't think that at this point in the RFP, without restarting the entire RFP, we can shorten the length of this contract, which would be a reason why we should move forward this cycle. Is there anybody that is willing to help answer that question? And then my other piece is, are there any concerns about evaluating and potentially shifting duties away from off-duty work and toward other types of security and traffic control agents? And is that something we could still do within this term of this parking contract?
We'll recognize Mr. Alan Klugman.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Chowdhury, members of the committee. Again, my name is Alan Klugman. I'm the Director of the Traffic and Parking Services Division of Public Works. This contract flows up through our division. I think there's two questions we want to address here. Number one is the question regarding the RFP terms and the solicitation we did. In short, what Councilmember Palmisano said, that is absolutely our interpretation. The contract is for a minimum of 3 years. It has 2 one-year extensions. If we enter into this contract and then exercise the extensions, each of those would come back to this body for approval, so there would be that check-in at that point. I do not know any way that we could do less than 3 years with the current RFP that we issued and the responses that we received. We received responses from 2 different firms. They both proposed on the same thing. I don't know how we would go back to one firm and change the terms that were in the RFP. So short answer is I agree with what council members said. I do not believe we can change the terms. A second question I think had to do with the delineation of work between off-duty police, traffic control agents, other security. Maybe if I can just speak for a moment about that. There is nothing in the contract that specifies the number of hours for off-duty police or security or traffic control or whatnot. It gives us and the operator the flexibility to choose the methods we feel best to operate our ramps, both from a safety point of view, from a traffic and parking management point of view. We do employ security. The biggest portion of our security expense, and I believe it was in the memo that we submitted to Councilmember Cashman, the biggest expense for security over the course of the year is to a private security firm. I'm very proud of the work we do in the security realm, and I don't want to get on too far of a tangent, but just say our ramps are very well received in terms of their safety and security. That's why they're popular. That's why the sports teams have put our names of our ramps on their websites to direct their customers and visitors and attendees to come to ramps. So we put a lot of attention to security. It's very close to our heart. But we use private security for that. We supplement that with off-duty police. It's a small fraction of the total security bill that we pay over the course of the year. And then relative to the total amount of money that goes to off-duty police, I just want to make sure we understand the flow of that work and the flow of that money. They are essentially employees of our parking operator. Minneapolis taxpayers are not paying the off-duty police officers. All the payments for all of our expenses, including to any security personnel or traffic management personnel, that comes from the revenue in the parking fund. So that's the flow of that money. If you look at the total amount of money that our parking operator pays to off-duty police for their two functions, one is security, one is traffic management, about 20% roughly is for traffic management. That's principally managing the exits of the parking ramps during busy times, and about 80% is security. I do believe we could enter into discussions with regulatory services and the traffic control folks in terms of could we make use of traffic control agents for that traffic management portion. I will just note that historically, traffic control did not have the personnel resources to provide that service. That's why historically we've gone with off-duty police to provide that service. We've stayed with it. There's nothing in the contract that mandates we have to do that. In terms of using traffic control agents for any of the other security work, which is about 80% of the operator's payments to the police, I don't think that would be possible. We are using sworn officers to supplement our security team for the expertise and abilities they bring to the situations. Primarily, they're used in our busiest ramps during peak events and those sorts of times, and that's when we bring them in to supplement our security folks.
Madam Chair, Director Klugman, thank you so much for all of that information. I think it's really important that this is paid entirely by parking revenue, that there are not taxpayer impacts happening here. And colleagues, I sincerely appreciate the concern here about how we do our RFPs and our contracts. It is genuine concern, and I also wish that it were different, but I think that putting this off another cycle puts people's jobs on the line. They will get notice, probably, through our contractor that they won't have a job starting October 1st because they will have 14 days notice that they would not have a job. So to make your point and put people's livelihoods in a risky position is not really worth it here. I'm happy to take on and continue the discussion about a shift to potential traffic control in the future, but I don't think that we should take the people that are employed in these ramps in different ways of just their maintenance workers and staff. I don't think that's a fair position to put jobs in our city in right now. I would prefer that we move forward with this contract, considering we cannot go back and change the term of it this cycle.
Thank you. I'll recognize Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Chowdhury. Just following up on some of the things that staff just mentioned, I did want to give a little bit of context to the memo that was shared based off of what we just heard. So the reason why I'm proposing a referral back also I highlighted my main concern around the off-duty usage. Right now, the expense that we're assigning to this contract just for security alone, you highlight that, is a total of $8.2 million. Of that $8.2, $900,000 of that is going to off-duty, which I will say is a little bit concerning that we're providing $900,000 to a private vendor to then go pay for MPD officers to do security. You just highlighted also about 80% of that is going to another security firm. So it really feels duplicitous to have two separate, a security firm and then private officers doing the same function. I do want to provide clarity. There is security. If we remove off-duty from this, security is still being provided at a pretty substantial funding amount in this contract. And then in addition, $200,000 is just for traffic control. Once again, relegated to off-duty. That's where the $1.1 million total came from. That we're paying a private vendor to then go pay officers to offer this security services in their side hustle time. That is really concerning, especially as we're hearing about staffing challenges repeatedly from MPD. So for me, that does feel like that should be something amendable in this contract. You're still getting security that's being paid for through another vendor. It does not make sense fully to me as to why $1.1 million of off-duty work needs to be integrated into this contract. In regards to the point raised by Councilmember Palmisano about amending a contract, from my understanding, especially since we've seen this with other departments like Neighborhood Safety Department, where they've gone back and forth with the vendors after our RFP has been assigned, it's really at the discretion of negotiations between the city and the vendor whether or not they would be able to amend a contract even to a different date. So I believe this body have seen a precedent where that has happened, where a different contract has come or amended contract has come forward with different stipulations around the timeline. So I'm confused as to how that's possible for other departments, but not in this case with Public Works. And I don't know if City Attorney's Office has the ability to shed some light if there's a reason why that's not applicable.
Attorney
Madam
Anderson.
Chair, council members, so I don't know anything about this particular contract, but sometimes the answer depends on what the RFP provided and the terms of the RFP, if they're very specific, and then the contract would have to obviously comply with the terms of the RFP or would have to start all over with the RFP process. I just don't know anything about this particular contract, but that's one of the reasons why sometimes there's less flexibility.
And would love then a follow-up memo on that, because I'm just referencing Neighborhood Safety Department, where in their contracts for, let's say, group violence intervention services, they had a also start date of April 1st. We've had multiple amended contracts come before this body with a different date start since then that they negotiated with the vendor, even after the RFP had went forward, and there was a scope of work included in that and a particular change or start date. So it does really seem it's at the discretion of the department and the vendor to have that negotiations, and it's not necessarily locked in by the council vote. So yeah, we've seen that. We've voted on contracts for Neighborhood Safety Department to start in April 1st, and that has not happened. We were told negotiations were still happening. So again, seeing the precedents where negotiations can happen. And thank you for flagging that this contract technically expires by September 30th, allowing us time to maybe bring an amended version forward either by Thursday or by the next cycle. Still puts us on track if the body had the will to pass it before the expiration date, because we meet before the expiration date. So I did want to flag that concern that there is still time to get this resolved before that ultimate expiration date that's currently stipulated. So I would like the time to make sure that we're providing a contract that addresses these concerns, and it does seem like there is space, hopefully willingness. So that is why I'm supporting the motion.
Councilmember Wansley, would you be able to just reiterate what you wanted an administrative follow-up on for the clerks?
Yes, and this is probably for the city attorneys to essentially note the difference here between public works contract, neighborhood safety. If there's any provision that prohibits negotiations after council approval from changing terms and conditions of a RFP.
Thank you. Next, I'll recognize Councilmember Cashman.
If I may.
Thank you. What's that?
Would it be all right if I recognized staff
Oh,
ahead
yeah,
of you? Okay,
absolutely.
great. Director Klugman, thank you.
Vice Chair Chowdhury, thank you. Vice Chair Chowdhury, members of the committee, Councilmember Wands, I think with what you just discussed, I wrote down 2 points. One is the contract. I'm not going to speak about that. I think the other one had to do with the use of security. And I just want to be very clear to this body how us and our parking operator use the MPD. We do spend a substantial amount of money on private security. That's a fact. I would suggest that the magnitude of that number is reflective of the size of our operation. 15 ramps, 18,000 spaces. You know, it's a big operation. It's a very big operation. One of the largest parking operators in downtown. And that's why the numbers are, you know, at first glance they're very high, but I think, you know, that's just the size of our operation. But I guess I want to be very clear that, again, there's nothing in this contract that mandates who does the security, but it's been our judgment as parking lot operators, you know, ourselves, our professional opinions, working with our management company, discussions with MPD, discussion with council members who have an interest in downtown. And I do not believe that some of what's been talked about today in terms of assigning additional security duties to the private security would be the right way to go or would even be possible. We have several benefits of having MPD on site. We use them, again, I've kind of said this, but I think it bears repeating. We use them on the busiest nights, on the busiest days for the largest events. We use them at bar close. We use them on weekends. You know, the ramps are a nexus of activity when you have the ABC ramps, the Hawthorne ramps, the other ones kind of serving the North Loop, the warehouse district, the entertainment district. A lot of things happen. You know, it's a lot of people coming in and out of those ramps. We have situations we need to deal with. We are very comfortable having police on site where they can respond immediately rather than the lag time if we need to place a call. So I just want to be very clear. It's our opinion that the police play a vital function in supplementing our private security team, and I do not believe that there's duties that we would want to transfer away from the police or could to some of our private security. So I just, regardless of contract structure and things like that we're talking about, I just want to say that we feel the police have very much helped our partnership with our downtown stakeholders in terms of providing safe, secure ramps that provide a very good visitor experience for the people coming to our ramps when they come to enjoy downtown.
Thank you. Now I'll recognize Councilmember Cashman.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I did want to add to the follow-up memo if we could understand what either the city charter or governance ordinance says about our ability to see RFPs when they go out, again, to have these conversations about the scope of work that we're asking for, like way before it all gets negotiated, because I do think that is unfortunate in this circumstance that we're having this contract once so much work has already, or we're having this conversation once so much work has already gone into it. And then I just wanted to note that in the memo, and I said this earlier, the memo does share that for 5 years we were putting $10 to $12 million of revenue annually into our general fund to lower the levy, and this year it's been just $2 million. So there is like an $8 to $10 million deficit. And that is, I mean, we have a 7.8 levy increase this year, and I think many of us are interested in getting that levy down, amending this scope of services, or at least taking some of it out of what we're paying to ABM. Seems like a good way to try to lower our tax levy and have $8 million extra dollars to put towards that. I think that would be a significant change. And so I would really like to see us strive for efficiency in this contract. And I guess this is a question for you, Mr. Klugman, is why does the DID assessment and the off-duty costs go through ABM? Why are we giving all this money to ABM and not just paying each of these budget lines as separate contracts to who they're supposed to be for?
Okay. Vice Chair Chowdhury, Councilmember Cashman, members of the committee. I think there's two questions that you just raised. If I may, I'd like to first speak to the first one, which is historically the parking fund contributed several $1 million, in some years as much as $10 million to the general fund. I have a graph here. I don't know if you can see it, but I look at this quite often in my office. This is what happened in March of 2020. Our parking counts went down. Maybe we can enter this in so others can see it. Oh, thank you. So like right side up, or? Yep. Did I get that right? I can't see the screen. Is this right?
That looks great, Mr. Klugman.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to be brief here, but this is one that's close to our hearts because our teams worked really hard about this. In 2019, the off-street parking revenue was $48 million. In 2020, it was 19, and 2021 was 18. So actually, in 2020, we had a couple months pre-COVID. And the heart of the matter is that, the parking ramp system, these are complex building structures with a lot of equipment. They take a certain amount of work to keep them in good shape and to keep them running. Some of those expenses continue on even when our traffic volumes, our counts went down. And really, the single reason why this fund is not contributing is strictly due to the number of people visiting downtown. So I take great pride in the management work that our team has done in partnership with our operator. I think we run a terrific system of ramps. And I won't go too on about that too long. I just want to make the point that when the parking volumes decreased in downtown, when COVID hit, we lost 88% of our parking volume. And it's kind of been, as you see in the charts, kind of been ticking up since then. We're now at a point where for day-to-day commuters, we're at about 60% of pre-COVID. Overall, we're about 80% of previous numbers because events are really back and they're back strong. So, long story short, I think the reason we've not been transferring the big dollar amounts lately are just because of, the different characteristics of downtown parents. I just want to say a few more things about that. Historically, the parking fund contributed to the general fund. That's more of a discussion between finance, upper levels of public works management. Some of that predates my time in this role. But I just want to note that for the first couple of years after COVID, the pro formas had those large transfers being made to the general fund from our parking fund. And we essentially depleted our cash reserve in our parking fund, and we deferred very important maintenance work and modernization and upgrade work because we were transferring money to the general fund. I'm very proud of the work we've done now. Mr. Drew and Mr. Clough and their team have done a terrific job of marketing the parking ramps, working with downtown stakeholders and employers on creative tools, because like the old-fashioned monthly contract doesn't make sense anymore for a lot of people. We have a lot of hybrid products. We've worked with the venue operators. We've done everything we can to bring people back in our ramps. We're seeing an increase in revenue. We're starting to put back the money that we need to do for maintenance of our ramps and kind of protecting them into the future. So I just want to be very clear about that I absolutely acknowledge that the dollar transfer has gone down. I don't think it's due to poor management. I think it's due to the volume of people coming downtown, and we've really worked our hardest to be good stewards of these parking ramps and run the system in a very high-level way. I think your second question had to do why pay a parking operator to then pay others. I appreciate the question. I just want to be very clear that this is a really tight contract. We negotiated the last contract very tight. 98.5% of the expenses that are paid by our operator are going directly to different vendors and service providers. It's repairs, it's maintenance, it's construction, it's everything from paying sales tax on when you pay to park. There's sales tax, we have to remit that to the state. It's the utility bills and on and on and on. They are not getting any sort of overhead or commission on that. They are serving as our agent to process those payments. The fee that they get from a management point of view, it's in their notes. I think it's $288,000 last year. It's a very modest fee. So I don't believe we have any financial inefficiency or loss by using this operator who's integrated in with our operation. They are working on our behalf. They're paying our bills. Obviously, that's a cost I would have to bear with staff if we were to pay those bills directly. So I don't believe that using the operator is introducing a financial inefficiency for us.
Thank you, Mr. Klugman. This is really helpful data, and I think it'll inform the policy and research look towards the future. I've certainly heard from operators that with less demand, we could potentially, and other private operators could sell some assets to then increase demand because there wouldn't be so much. So that's another solution too, just given how many more folks are now living downtown or using transit. I mean, the demand has certainly changed. And then also in the ABM part, I respectfully disagree. I think ABM is using our big upfront costs to then invest that in the marketplace, and that's how that tech company is getting their returns on this. And if this were to be brought in-house, we would be able to do the same with this revenue, to invest it in things that benefit us instead of an out-of-state tech company. Yes.
If I
Go
may,
ahead, Mr. Klugman.
Vice Chair Charlie and members of the committee, thank you again. I just, obviously we could have a long discussion if this goes to some sort of, policy and review exercise. We'll, happily take part in that, of course. I just want to note that there are probably some efficiencies and benefits to the city that are not apparent on first glance. And one of the benefits, and I think we spoke with you about this last week, one of the benefits of using our private operator who has national footprint, some of our costs become much more efficient. We used to do our credit card processing in-house. The fee we now pay because we're part of a bigger pool with this vendor, it's a much lower rate on each credit card transaction. There's a thing in the parking industry, which I always forget the exact acronym, it's PCI, I think it's Payment Card Industry Standards. That's a very strict audit process before we can even use these cards. That's something we had to undertake ourselves. That's now something we've offloaded to the vendor. There are several efficiencies built into this contract that I don't think are initially apparent that do help it provide a very good value to us. I just want to note that there's some things that we are taking advantages of economies of scale and national expertise and are part of some bigger pools that really have benefited us. So I do think that's an important thing to note.
Noted. Thanks. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Next, I'll recognize Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This graph doesn't surprise the couple of people up here that were in these seats back in 2020. We saw this back in 2020. We didn't get to see the recovery part, though. It created a huge gap that we are still recovering from. Also, in terms of these transfers, I want to point out this is not up to Public Works. How much gets transferred to the general fund. That's a budget discussion, and that's a discussion that we get to have and try to find balance in that. But I don't think it's appropriate to automatically presume poor management here. If we want to have a conversation about transferring more money out of this fund, I think that's a finance issue, and we should have that issue. I don't disagree that Councilmember Cashman that we should review in public at times these RFPs at an earlier point. We're past that here. Public Works is absolutely saying that we can shift our security procedures during the time of this contract. I also want to recognize something that wasn't said yet, that there would be a steep curve to define, hire, train, et cetera, the necessary staff for traffic control to take on supervision of up to 18,000 parking spaces. This is not something that we can just make a quick modification up here willy-nilly and get done in the next cycle. But in terms of Garda security, in terms of the janitorial services here, as outlined in that response memo, these are union jobs. Let's not hold up this renewal at this time to make a point like this. If I were one of those workers, seeing what this city council wants to do on a whim and push that out, I would be trying to look for other employment. So I would suggest we move forward with this today and we continue these discussions about finance, about how we do other types of security here. Public Works will be involved in some of those discussions, and they're very happy to be part of our policy and research study. But I also want to appreciate Chair Wansley probably wanted to have this entire discussion at AEO next week. But now we've had it here on the dais, and I suggest that we just go ahead and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll recognize Councilmember Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess, we've had a lot of discussion, and I too am sorry that allegations of mismanagement have been forwarded. But I'm just curious about traffic flow and how that is managed, and would it be different if there were, I don't know, some unnamed people doing it versus MPD helping with traffic management in these? having been downtown on many nights when there's thousands of people exiting these ramps, how would that happen?
Yep. Vice Chair Chowdhury, Councilmember Jenkins, I think if I understand the question, I just want to, again, probably repeating myself for the 100th time, there's nothing in this contract that stipulates who does the traffic management, so we have that flexibility. We're absolutely, taking in your input relative to that. The traffic management part is a very small part of this contract. It's about $200,000 over the course of the year. I'll just note that. Currently with city ordinance, the only people who can do traffic management on the street in the public right-of-way are sworn officers or the traffic control agents. And I think I noted previously, historically, the traffic control agents did not have the resources to do that. That's why we relied on the officers. I think if I understand your question, could others do it? I do think that's a fair point to talk about. It's come up on other projects. Is there a mechanism? I'm just saying, thinking here, if I may, could other people be trained in? Could other people be certified? We're absolutely willing to explore those. And I think that's more of a citywide, downtown-wide discussion than this contract. But, we will work with any, person who's qualified and certified to do traffic management to help expedite the ins and outs of our ramp. So hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, my personal opinion, I think people respect MPD more so. They're frustrated that they're waiting, et cetera, et cetera. I think that there is much more deference given to MPD than other folks trying to direct traffic. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll recognize Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Chowdhury. Just once again, with just the line of inquiry that people will be out of jobs should we not approve this. We have had several contracts that have come before this body that had a start date, and we were very much in real time learned that deliberations and negotiations, having approved that contract, still proceeds afterwards. So this idea that there is no negotiation period is not a thing. We've seen this. We've been through amended contract processes before, and you still have a cycle before the contract is expired for us to consider something that actually addresses the off-duty piece. And this is where I will actually challenge or have the disagreement with you, Mr. Klugman. Why not consider the buyback program then? We literally have a centralized program that essentially, I think, addresses the same concerns that you're mentioning of the need for or the desire for sworn personnel to fulfill a security position, but that actually is for external agencies or entities to then request a contract with the city, so it goes through a public process, and they pay for it up front. So we approve buyback contracts with all sorts of vendors, some of which will support downtown interests, like the Downtown Improvement District. Why not proceed with that? What is prohibiting a buyback to still have the MPD or sworn officers on site as an option, while maintaining the fact that we still have a decent funding amount allocated to security personnel or professionals at this site? So why not go through the buyback process?
Vice Chair Chowdhury, Councilmember Wansley, I must admit I'm not very familiar with the buyback process or contract mechanism, and I don't know if we want to or need to discuss that today. I think what I'd be looking for is what do we feel fits within the contract RFP that we've issued? And if there are suggestions on how we operate within that, for example, the buyback program, and how we secure our services, we're absolutely willing to listen to those. I'm not clear myself how that does that affect the contract RFP we've issued, and how that would enter into the negotiations with our selected vendor. So I'm sorry, I'm just not clear on that program.
No, that's good clarity. And I will say in the memo you mentioned in your comments that it doesn't designate whether, a security professional has to perform a function or sworn MPD. In your memo, it does note $900,000 goes to off-duty for security services. So for traffic, it doesn't just say anyone, it says $200,000 off-duty MPD. So that gives the assumption that once again, there is in mind where a portion of these funding appropriations are going towards, and we literally have another program that's designed to do what you're talking about, to offer sworn officers through a centralized program where it's tracked, because I'm also questioning, how did you even get to the figures of $900,000 worth of off-duty when we're literally going through that process and they don't even have fees yet around tracking how hours happen. So this buyback actually has that infrastructure in place. So I don't understand like how that got overlooked when you have major downtown interests constantly utilizing that program for similar functions. So I'm saying in a modified contract, you could actually highlight that piece. If we approve something today and just bank on a pinky promise that something will, be changed, I would rather see it be documented in the contract itself, because here it's saying, once again, the contract says this, but we have the flexibility to do that. Why not just have it reflected in the contract language, which we could have some time to have that be reflected, so that, again, what the buyback option is. That takes off $1.1 million off of this contract that the company itself could pay for upfront themselves, as opposed to us including that.
Vice Chair Chowdhury, Councilmember Ronsley, I'll be brief. I think I understand what you're saying. I just want to clarify one thing. We noted that within the security cost, $900,000 for MPD, and then $200,000 for traffic management for off-duty MPD. That's not stipulated in the contract, and maybe we weren't clear. That's what we spent last year. I just want to note that. So that's not a term of the contract where we're mandated or required to do it. That was our expense last year for that line item. And then just very specific, you asked about how we're able to come up with the numbers, or possibly MPD's not able to track that. We track that through the expenses that we pay out. We spoke with Councilmember Cashman on Friday, and by Monday we had those numbers, through our bookkeeping system to know for each of our line items where, through our parking operator, where have we spent the money. So that's how we knew it was $900,000 for security, $200,000 for traffic management last year. So I just want to state that's not a term of the contract or guarantee or stipulation. That's what our expense was.
I completely understand that. I'm just noting in the memo, it said this is where it was designated to. And also the question around tracking, the figure or expenses that you got, is that 3 officers that charge $300 an hour? Can you share, because that's how the expense came about. It's around what the officer charged you as a per hour rate to get to whatever you paid last year, if it's that $900,000 figure or the combination of both security or off duty. That is where I said, what is the tracking? Because we don't track, there's no standardization in which rate, unless MPD gave you a standardized rate.
Yep. Vice Chair Chowdhury, Councilmember Wansley, and committee members, I might begin, and I might even call one of my colleagues to fill me in, but if I just give you an overview. That is again, our parking operator makes the payment. The off-duty police are working as employees or contractors to that vendor. The vendor has negotiated a price with MPD for this particular service, and then they track it in terms of hours hired, right, and dollars paid. So that's where those numbers come from. We are not part of, say, a bigger buying pool or other entities like restaurants or bars or businesses that might be hiring MPD off-duty. This is our parking operator, us working together with the parking operator on what we think a game plan is for use of security. It is then our parking operator working with MPD on an agreed-upon rate, and then we get the personal hours that we need.
And so the vendor negotiates, which could still be a rate of $300 per hour with the individual MPD officer. You all don't know what that rate is.
Yeah, Vice Chair Chowdhury, Councilmember Wansley, members of the committee, it's not $300. My recollection is that it's in the range of about $110 to $150. I think it's closer to $110, and that's the rate that our team through our parking vendor negotiated in a multiple year agreement. So that's the rate we're paying.
And do we have a per rate for security? For me, again, the difference with off-duty is, again, the officer and I use $300 as a rhetorical figure because we don't know typically on average how officers are charging. They have full discretion to negotiate a rate with the vendor. And that's why I also asked, why not just go through a buyback process? Because that is a centralized thing. The vendor still has to apply through a public process to then give us, because it sounds like what you just said, the vendor tracks it, they negotiate with MPD. This, through a buyback process, allows the city to do that direct negotiation, make sure that staffing is being administered in a way that doesn't put other city services in a compromised position. And other external entities have used this. So that's why I'm also concerned why buyback was not offered as an option.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. I will also just say that we have had members now 3 times in queue, and just to be fair to everyone, we're going to limit everyone at 3 so we can continue moving to our agenda, through our agenda. But we do have quite a few members currently waiting to speak, so I will recognize Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you. Mr. Klugman, and I see Mr. Drew, I am impressed at the way you manage the parking in all facets here, not just the ramps, but the street parking. So thank you for your expertise. And I'm going to vote today to move this forward. I do believe that you negotiated the best contract, and I don't think we should delay. And in particular, Mr. Klugman, thank you for explaining the loss of parking revenue that is directly tied to the COVID, that we're a different city today than we were in 18 and 19 when the revenues were flowing. And once we get these office towers back, I'm sure that will happen again. So again, I encourage our colleagues to push this forward today into the full council. And this is not a time to suggest that we should take this in-house. This is not a time to increase city staff. This is a time to be as efficient as possible. That's just not a good idea to take this in-house. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Koski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just was wondering if we get some clarity. I know Councilmember Cashman, one of the thoughts or ideas she had was just to change the timing on the contract. And so I feel like I'm still a bit not clear on if we can or cannot do that. If we, I believe you were requesting it would to be a 1-year contract so that we could do the work and do a little bit more research on this. Is that a possibility, or is that completely off the books? I just need a clear answer on that. To either our CAO or to you, Mr. Klugman.
I mean, I can say it depends on what the RFP said. So if the RFP was an RFP for a 3-year contract, then changing it to a 1-year contract would be a material change, and we'd have to start over.
And that is different. We have done this in the past. Can you describe why this is different from other contracts or negotiations that we've had?
Yeah, and again, it just depends on what the RFP says. Some RFPs are silent on term. I mean, it just.
And this one has a clear.
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I have not seen the RFP, so I don't know what the RFP says.
If we can just get clarity if the RFP states the years, that would be helpful, and I'm happy to go back.
Yeah, and if you don't have it quite yet, there's a couple people in queue, so if you want to get that together, we can move to other comments that you might have, Councilmember Koski, or we can go to other council members.
That was all that I had, so happy to.
Okay, I think we're trying to find the RFP
Thank you.
as we speak. Thank you.
Once we have that, we can go forward. I will next recognize Councilmember Vita.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Klugman. Thank you for your expertise. I really do appreciate, and as a staff person, you do a really great job. I appreciate your expertise in parking in particular. And look, you had this graph just right on hand to pull out and show to us how parking looks. And as a person who understood being on the city council, that the dollars in parking has shifted dramatically through COVID and through how people use downtown. I also understand the safety component of that, whether it's perception or reality. People want to see police officers in parking ramps and in parking lots, and that makes people feel safer. That makes a person feel like their car won't be stolen if they see a police officer near a parking ramp, or that it's dark outside. You come out 2 o'clock in the morning and you see a police officer. So regardless of how some individuals may feel about police, there are people who feel safer in the presence of police, and I appreciate us having that for people. These numbers are going to go back up because of that, because of actual safety and safety perception. I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with people over the past 4 years about how unsafe downtown is and how they're scared to come and park in a parking ramp and then say, no, there's a police officer there, or, there's whomever there. And I definitely understand the difference between security officers and police officers. There are things that the police officers can do that a security officer cannot do, like make an arrest for someone who is being unruly or doing whatever in a parking lot right then and there. Lots of violations happen to people in parking ramps. Lots of things, unsavory, everything in parking ramps that I, for one, am happy that a police officer is on site to handle. And so I appreciate the thoughtfulness behind this 30-year contract. I'm not saying that this isn't something that shouldn't be revisited, but it is my understanding that this is a 30-year contract, and no, I mean, the term that it's been in effect is about 30 years. Like, we've been in partnership 50 years? 50 years. So 50-year contract that's been in the works with the city of Minneapolis. I'm not saying there's not a better service, there's not a better way, but what I do know is these sorts of 50 years of work does not change in 2 weeks. Never have, never will. This is not going to be worked out in a council cycle. And so for me, it's not worth it if there's the potential of folks losing their jobs over 2 weeks where we know we won't accomplish what's happened in 50 years. And if people have particular issues or specific things that they need to work it out, work it out. You got 3 years. This is a 3-year contract. Work it out. I thought this was about general funds transfers, then it turned into an MPD thing, then it turned to buyback versus whatever. I don't know. But this is not going to happen in one council cycle. It's not worth the risk of somebody watching this meeting right now and thinking their job is on the line because we can't work something out that's not going to be worked out. You all have done a phenomenal job, and let's stop acting like negotiating the contract happened last week or last cycle. People have been working on negotiating this contract for I don't know how long. I'm sure well over a year to come to the terms of a 3-year contract. So you don't go back in one council cycle because somebody doesn't like MPD and say, let's go fix it now.
Decorum.
In 2 weeks.
No one never said a dislike of MPD.
We can hear.
No ascribing motive.
We can see.
We're not going to do
We can
any
hear what's
ascribing
going
motive.
on. Like I said, we're not going to fix it in 2 weeks. Let's save these jobs. Let's save the security of this community, the people that are going to be downtown going into parking ramps who want to be safe with their families, and then y'all figure it out later. Thank you so much, Mr. Klugman. You are so professional and so wonderful, and I appreciate you.
So it might look like Mr. Klugman has the answer to the RFP question. I will remind all members that no one should ascribe motive to other members unless that's a statement that they have clearly made. We have a lot of items that we need to go through. Yes, I will recognize you, Mr. Klugman.
Vice Chair Chowdhury and members of the committee, as Director Sexton just kind of whispered in my ear, our team confirmed that it was very clear in the RFP it's for a 3-year minimum term with the option for 2 one-year extensions, but the 3-year minimum is a prime feature and requirement of the RFP.
Thank you, and I will just ask our City Attorney Anderson to clarify with that information what that means.
Council Chair, council members, I mean, given that the term was a prime feature of the RFP, that's a material term of the contract, and if we were to switch to a shorter term, I think we'd have to start over in the RFP process.
Great, thank you. I put myself in queue for a question. I wanted to see, has this last AEO committee, was this the first time that this contract was on the agenda? I'm getting a nod yes from Councilmember Wansley. With that in mind, I wanted to get a clarification. If this was laid over for a single cycle, would it have impacts on individuals' jobs? Would they get a notice that was stated before up here? I want to get factual information in regards to that.
Vice Chair Chowdhury, members of the committee, I'm not sure what our operator would do. I mean, what they would do if we laid this over for 2 weeks and didn't approve the contract. We could check and report back to you. I don't know what their operational game plan would be if they learn that this does not go forward today. We've not asked them that. Am I answering your question? I
That
truly don't
answers
know.
the question.
Yeah.
The answer is, yeah, you're not sure. I will just stay, I think it's important if we have contracts, if they come before a council committee, that a delay is always possible. It's never guaranteed, especially when the committee itself is an oversight committee, right? There could be questions at any given contract, and if 1-2 week cycle where the vote comes forward is going to make or break it, that's not realistic as it comes to our business in City Hall. Oftentimes, items are delayed an additional cycle. It would be a different story for me personally if this was on the agenda multiple times over and we're at a point where it's like we just need to take action. I'll state for myself, I personally don't support us entirely reinventing the wheel for a contract and bringing everything in-house. I just don't think that we have the capacity within our staff and our council body at this moment to achieve such a legislative feat with the accuracy that's necessary. I will note, for me, it's not about having police officers or not. I understand the perspectives up here about having officers present and visible downtown on big event days. And I think it's more so about if we have officers who are paid with their taxpayer dollars already on the payroll, why not have them do that work on payroll through the systems that already exist, rather than using public dollars to go to off-duty, essentially privatizing our own public safety force. That's why I think that buyback comment is actually really helpful, because it would go through the MPD payroll rather than something that is off to the side away from public and city oversight. Right, I think that's an interesting thing for us to take on and discuss. And I one question that I have, and I don't think we'll have an answer for it today, but I think it would be interesting for us to explore, is if there's a policy resolution or a standard that this body could set about if we are using public dollars for a contract for safety, that if MPD officers are requested, that it goes through a buyback process rather than an off-duty process. I don't know the legality of that or that consideration, but I'll just put that forward. I don't think it's a bad conversation to have about doing a system that is already going through public oversight versus one that is known to be more obscure and less consistent, that the city of Minneapolis, as it goes to off-duty, across multiple mayors have been trying to reform and change, and even this body has taken on efforts to address. I think that's a fair thing for us to discuss, and it's been something that councils before us have been trying to figure out. Those are all my comments. I'll go to Councilmember Osman.
Thank you. I'll be quick. I have been listening, and there are many questions the committee made or asked the city attorney. They have asking you, and our job and the reason we are elected is to oversight, is to look into details, and I think that is just, we're doing our job, and that's not saying I'm against this or anything like that, but for council members who are doing their job and looking at this, that a lot of things are not clear, and many questions have been asked. And I think, I support the motion to delay, I guess, one more cycle, if that's the motion council member made, to come back together to, hopefully answer those questions that council members had and come back to this on the table. I don't think that's an issue, and I don't think that's anything not supporting the MPD or supporting the MPD. We want our officers to be safe, and we want them to have a parking and space and also provide the best services to downtown businesses and area. So just want to make that very clear. We're doing our job, and council members who are asking, looking into the details and doing their job, which is oversight, I support their motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, are there any additional comments? Seeing none, that motion has been made and properly seconded. Clerk, please call the roll on this item.
Chair Chowdhury, before I call the motion, could I clarify, Councilmember Wansley had moved to refer it back to committee. I'm assuming she meant the next meeting of the Administration and Enterprise Oversight Committee, which is September 15th?
Yes, and what's in speaker management. Yep.
Fantastic. Just wanted to clarify that before calling the roll. Councilmember Payne.
Aye.
Wansley.
Aye.
Rainville.
No.
Vita.
No.
Osman.
Aye.
Cashman.
Aye.
Jenkins.
May.
Chugtai.
Aye.
Koski.
Nay.
Palmisano.
No.
Vice Chair Chowdhury.
Aye.
Chair Chavez.
Aye.
There are 7 ayes and 5 nays.
That item carries, and then will be referred to the AO meeting on September 15th. Next are the 2025-2028 Violence Prevention Service contracts. The AO committee was in the middle of discussing this agenda, so that's why it's here. Again, staff is on hand to answer any questions that council members may have. I know that Councilmember Osman, you wanted to speak to this item, and I will also let other members get on queue if they would like to have discussion.
Yes, I saw that. I thought that I saw Director Harrington, but just wanted to, no, not here? Okay. Just wanted to get more details of what areas. Oh, here we go. Thanks, Director, for coming. Just wanted to go overall, if you can give us the overview, because I'm not a member of the committee that it came through, but if you can give us overview, what these contracts are, and also what area are they covering, and also specifically for me, what services are being provided, not just this, but in general, Elliott Park and Stevens Square. If you can kind of highlight those two, that would be helpful. Thank you so much.
Vice Chair Chowdhury, Councilmember Osman, the contracts that are before you are the Violence Prevention Services Program, otherwise known as the Violence Prevention Master Contract. This is, I believe, the 5th batch of contracts to come before City Council. We have always had violence prevention contracts in neighborhood safety. This year, we decided to take a page out of the playbook of the health department, and instead of doing RFPs for very specific contracts, to do an RFP that would pre-approve a larger pool of community organizations that could be providing services throughout the city. And then, as the need arises throughout the city, we could issue work orders to activate those services. And so there are, I think, a total of 32 contracts, 35 contracts, I believe, that have, will, if this latch batch is approved, be pre-approved for us to activate. Right now, we have only activated one of those contracts. Somali Youth Link had a contract that was executed and 2 work orders that were issued. They are hoping to begin services this week, and their service area is Dinkytown, the Stone Arch Bridge, around Carmel Mall, Stevens Square neighborhood, around the YMCA on Blaisdell. I think I got all of them. Portions of Whittier, obviously, are within that. The rest of the contracts are still being negotiated. Not the contracts necessarily. The contracts are going to be executed, but the work orders are being negotiated. And so it would be premature for me to stand here and list out where all of those will be, but we have a number of earmarks that are funding some of these contracts, and so some of them are known. They will be in areas that council members have already indicated, and the rest we are using data to determine activation needs throughout the city.
Okay, so this is a little bit different than violent interrupters, traditional violent interrupters we had, which is, people got used to it. They are there 5 days, 7 days a week, whatever, consistently. So these groups here, the one you mentioned, let's use some other link as an example. Are they, when you say activate, are they just going there when they're called, when there's a trouble, or do they have some kind of set schedule where community members expect them to be there? They're there Friday to Saturday or something similar to that. How do we get that information, or if that information is available to the public, where those folks will be at?
Vice Chair Chowdhury, Councilmember Osmond, Somali Youth Link in particular is working on their schedule right now, given the diversity of areas that we're asking them to cover. We are purposefully writing the work orders to be flexible so that the organizations can go to the areas of need based on their individual needs. So the Stevens Square neighborhood may not have the exact same needs as the Stone Arch Bridge, for example, and they won't have the exact same hours and teams there. And so it's really going to be up to the team to figure that out, and I believe that is what they've been working on this week. But each of the contractors that are approved within this pool brings something different to the neighborhoods and would be activated for different reasons. So Somali Youth Link does a lot of street level activation, kind of a safety ambassador model. There are some other organizations that provide services directly to single fathers, for example. Those services will look differently and be activated through a work order based on the needs of a specific area.
Okay, all right. I think it's helpful to get that information, and just the overall the violent interrupters that we traditionally had, those were consistent, timely, and these are just not a full service to the community, but they're there to help out, and it's really great to have that. But I hope to hopefully have full services like the ones we have seen on Lake Street, on Cedar Riverside, on Broadway, different areas where they're there consistently. This what do you call the master plan? It's
You'll need to unlock your iPhone first.
Yeah, so thank you so much for your work, and I know it's you have been doing great to getting this contract to move forward, and we'll see how this master plan works. And I'm hoping that spaces that have bigger issue, mainly Stevens Square or Elliott Park or different areas in my district, hopefully in next year or so we can have traditional violent interrupters doing services there. We'll see how this master plan works in those areas. Thank you so much.
Vice Chair Chowdhury, if I may just add one more comment, Councilmember Osmond. I appreciate you trying to make that distinction between the violence interrupters and these violence prevention services, because they are very different and they're intended to complement each other. Mm-hmm. Violence interrupters aren't the right fit for every problem that we have in our city or every neighborhood necessarily. And so adding on these violence prevention services allow us to be a bit more nimble and focus the solution to the needs of organizations. And so this should not take away from what violence interrupters are doing within their neighborhoods, but add to it within the rest of the city.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I will recognize Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Chowdhury. I did want to note for committee, this item was actually pulled by Councilmember Vita, so if there's any deference to her for Director Harrington, I know this was something that was pulled in committee before we had a crash. So wanted to make sure if you have context for Director Harrington for why it was pulled.
Oh, you just clarified it for me, Director Harrington. I just wanted to make sure that it was on the public record that these are separate than a violence interrupter contract, and that these contracts are specific to the needs of the contractors, that those people develop work plans and they speak specifically to what they're going to do in the areas that they're targeting, and it's not the people that you see walking outside as the Minneapolis Strategic Outreach or some of the other outreach initiatives we have. I think there's just been a lot of confusion, and specifically because this may be like the fifth time that these contracts have come before the council, and that was what I wanted. I just wanted clarification on the difference between the service providers, and that every one of these service providers may do something completely different from each other. It's not like a one-way situation, and it may not be that we go into a contract with a dollar amount for each one of these people either. It might be like something comes up and we need to enter into a contract with the dollar, with the specific dollar amount attached to it. That was the clarity that I wanted you to specify in committee, because it's just been a lot of questions about there's more violence interrupter contracts, and that's not what this is.
Right.
Great, thank you. Members, are there any other questions or comments? No. Seeing no further discussion, I'll make a motion to approve these. Clerk, could you please call the roll on this item?
Councilmember Payne.
Aye.
Wansley.
Aye.
Rainville.
Aye.
Vito.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Cashman.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Chuktai.
Aye.
Koski.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Vice Chair Chowdhury.
Aye.
Chair Chavez.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes.
That item carries. Now we will have a presentation related to the acquisition of properties for a Public Works water distribution maintenance facility. I will welcome up presenters Director Annika Bankston, Director Barbara O'Brien, and Matt Hannon for more information.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Chowdhury and council members. My name is Barbara O'Brien. I'm the Director of Property Services for the City of Minneapolis. The RCA that is in front of you was first brought through the committee, AEO committee, and because of technical issues, we were transferred here today. So we are prepared to talk about the RCA specifically for the acquisition of 2705 University Northeast. This happens to be a piece of property that is adjacent to the Public Works' newest facility, also known as the East Yard Storage and Maintenance Facility. We have been searching for just about 2 years now for a piece of property that would accommodate the water maintenance yard. This particular function, this critical function for the city, has always been included in the Hiawatha expansion project. Until recently, the city had made the decision to cease with that master plan, and we were then sent out to seek a new location for this critical city function. So today, we would like to present some pieces about what happens at a water yard, what is a water yard. I'd like to talk about some community engagement that has already happened around this, and then talk about next steps in the process for the acquisition of this property. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my partner and colleague in Public Works, Director Annika Bankston, to talk about what is a water yard and what are the functions that happen in proposed on this site. Thank you.
Thank you, Director O'Brien. Once again, my name is Annika Bankston. I am the Division Director of Public Works Water Treatment and Distribution Services. So I want to take this opportunity just to provide a quick overview of what our division is and who the people are that will be working at this proposed facility, why we need a new home, and how this proposed acquisition is the right fit for our division. Again, the Division of Water Treatment and Distribution Services is the drinking water utility within the Department of Public Works. We provide drinking water to the 500,000 residents of the city of Minneapolis and our wholesale customers. We take about 20 billion gallons of water from the Mississippi River each year and treat it at our 2 water treatment campuses in Fridley and Columbia Heights. Specifically before you today is the facility that houses our distribution operations. The distribution system that sends water throughout the city consists of over 1,000 miles of water main and the associated numerous valves, hydrants, as well as all the water meters that deliver water into all the properties of the city. The water distribution staff specifically is about 100 people, drinking water professionals. A number of those, a large portion of those, are actually certified Minnesota water supply operators, and then all the support functions that go with us. I'll talk a little bit about what each of them do. So in the office functions of a water distribution facility, we do all of our customer service. We have a call center that we field calls from people seeking information about water services, permits, permit reviews, as well as planning and scheduling, making sure those 100 people that are doing the water distribution work have accurate job plans, have all the materials that are needed, and are able to go out and do work efficiently every day. We have large GIS mapping and records keeping functions that are done at this facility, as well as administration and management. So those are what I would call the front office type operations at this facility. Out in the streets, it's all the water system work. Again, of those 100 water distribution staff, about 80 of them are going out into the field throughout the city every day. They're inspecting and repairing valves, finding and repairing leaks, working with private properties as well as public water mains, working on the water pipes, installing taps for new services, and turning water services on and off as development happens throughout the city. We also perform extensive locates, marking all that water main infrastructure to make sure that construction can happen safely throughout the city. A lot of inspections, and then also all the disinfection and testing of those water mains as we're doing that work. Where we do the work, really our water work happens throughout the entire city, obviously. This is just a map showing the work orders for a given day from earlier this month. A couple things to note. The green star is the location of our current facility that we'll talk about in a little bit, and then the red star is the location of the proposed new facility, about a little over, just about 2 miles to the northeast. So again, our crews are deploying out into the city everywhere, every day. So why we do need a new home. The existing facility at 935 Fifth Avenue, it's 5th and Hennepin, just over in Marcy Homes across the river, is undersized and woefully outdated. We've actually been there for over 125 years. The building itself was constructed almost 100 years ago. We have staffs that are housed in temporary construction trailers. We have insufficient space for all the materials that we need. We're leasing parking at an annual cost of $88,000 a year just to be able to have places for our employees to come to work each day. As mentioned, as Director O'Brien mentioned, it's been a long-term need and a long-term plan to basically get a new home for our operations. Just to kind of some more of the challenges that we have, outdated and inadequate restrooms, insufficient locker rooms. This is a photo literally of where our uniform service comes and goes at the edge of our garage area because that's the only space we have to do that. We have just a single small conference room. Nothing is ADA compliant, as you can imagine, in a facility that's over 100 years old. There's obsolete workshops, as well as just the general inadequacy of HVAC and building structures. The photo on the bottom is one of our, or actually is our main break area that's located in a wood shop or in a workshop, along with lockers and old furniture such that we can find and have. Another challenge we have is warehousing. As mentioned, with all the water distribution infrastructure, there's a lot of needs for material storage and pipe storage. We are literally storing things in an old barn and in a hayloft. So we really only have enough materials, storage space for materials that we need to do kind of day in, day out, or maybe a week in, week out. So we're having to store materials off-site, generally up at our treatment campuses, and move those in and out in order to do our regular operations. And even with the hayloft, that's becoming more of a challenge for us to use because the crane can no longer be used and can't be certified. The yard storage of the facility, we do have things like hydrants, large spools, large sticks of pipe, as we like to say, larger valves and things like that need to be stored outside. And basically that space is not only insufficient in size, but also inefficient layout because we're having to manage moving all of our equipment and vehicles around the facility as well. So we undertook at the beginning of this effort to make sure we were moving into a space that's going to meet our needs to update a facility space needs study. And what we worked with an architect and identified that we need about 1.6 acres for the actual office, shops, and warehouse, additional 1.4 acres or so for the yard, and then parking for the fleet that we have, the employees and the visitors is about 2 acres. So all in all, we're looking for about 4.9 acres and make sure we have space for best management practices for stormwater management. So again, that's the summary, about 5 acres of land, making sure that it's zoned for utility operations. And then again, since we're traveling throughout the city, we're looking for a location with convenient roadway access to be able to move out and get to where we need to go. And so when this particular property became available, it checked all those boxes for us. It has adequate land, it's zoned production and processing, it does have reasonable access on University and Lowry to get to the interstate, and then it's very exciting because it is adjacent to the existing East Side maintenance facility, which allows for some future synergies, one of which that's obvious from the very beginning is that we'll be able to use that single fuel island. We won't need to build a separate fuel island for the future equipment that will still need to be fueled. The other opportunities as far as electric vehicles and solar and renewable energies, all those types of things are going to be incorporated into this facility. We're going to be able to build a sustainable facility at this new site because we have the space we need to do it. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Haanen to talk a little bit about next steps and the specific matter before you today, the acquisition of the property. Thank you.
Vice Chair Chowdhury, members of the committee, Matt Haanen, Finance Property Services. So Property Services has been discussing a potential acquisition with the broker of 2705 University Ave Northeast. And just for quick point of clarification, because on the action, it's listed as 4 different properties. There are 4 different parcels comprising this property that's kind of commonly referred to as 2705 University Ave Northeast. So we have signed a non-binding letter of intent that outlines the term of a potential sale of the property to the city. We also have a finalized draft purchase agreement with the owner as well. If this action is approved by council, we will move forward with execution or signing of a purchase agreement. After that time, the city has 90 days to perform due diligence work on the site. This work would include items like Phase 1 and Phase 2 environmental testing, as well as other site evaluation. Closing on the property would occur on or before December 31st, 2025. This tight timeline to close is a requirement of the seller and why we're bringing this RCA through on relatively short notice. There's an existing tenant in the space, Bag Tape Closures. They have a lease that runs through January 31, 2028. The tenant has expressed to the building owner and to the city that they're not interested in staying in the space and signing a long-term lease to stay there, which is ideal for us. If the city purchases the property, Bag Tape would remain as a tenant in the space until January 2028, unless they would agree to some type of early termination of their lease. Property Services has been in contact with them about our interest in acquiring the site, and notifying them of the potential for early termination if they're interested. If the city purchases the property, the existing buildings would be demolished to make way for a new water maintenance facility to be built on the site. We don't yet have a design consultant working with us on the project yet, so we don't have any kind of renderings of what that might look like at this time. I believe with that concludes our presentation, and staff from Public Works and Property Services will remain for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hannon. We have a few council members in queue. I'll first recognize Council President Payne.
Thank you, Vice Chair Chowdhury. Just want to express my thanks and gratitude to the Finance and Property Services team. I think we're all aware of the background on this facility and the reason we're seeking out a new facility. The location is in my ward, and it happens to be directly adjacent to a facility that also had a fairly complex history with our community. If you may recall, some years back, there was a Don't Dump on Northeast campaign, because that was originally the site of a proposal for a hazardous material waste transfer site. And that evolved into what is now the East Side Maintenance Facility as a result of some community backlash to that proposal. And so it was really critically important to me that my community had an opportunity to learn about this project and weigh in before there was a vote that was moving this forward. Finance and Property Services worked really hard along with Public Works leadership to get that community meeting together. And it wasn't the most attended meeting, but we did have some important community representatives, particularly from our local newspaper, who are going to be able to help share the vision for this. And I think one of the things that was also really eye-opening was seeing the physical constraints of the existing building meant there was actually more vehicle traffic because they had to do daily warehouse transfers from the Fridley facility. This new facility not only has the capacity for more warehousing space, so you don't need those daily deliveries, but it's also like right up the street from the Fridley facility. And so I think that this is landing in a good place, and I'm just really grateful that staff were so accommodating to be able to bring some transparency to this process. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll recognize Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Chowdhury. I will be voting in support of item number 7 so that the city can move forward with this location for the water distribution maintenance facility. Many of us are aware that for several years, actually, the Fry administration insisted that there was only one viable option for this facility, and that was the Roof Depot site in East Phillips. And we were repeatedly told that, we had to move forward with the site in spite of it violating multiple
Ascribing motive, Madam Chair.
I'm not ascribing motive. These are actually facts, and I'm going to continue on with my facts. Thank you, Councilmember Rainville. So we were told we had to move forward with this, even though that it did not align with many of the city's policies and goals. And again, told that there was no option and we had to override the needs of Black and Brown and Indigenous residents. And I'm glad that this proposal or item that we're considering show that Roof Depot was never the only option for a water yard, and really glad that there was a number of us on this body who did not accept that line, and actually did a great deal to work with many stakeholders across the city and state to advance other options that we're considering today. And I want to say thank you to our staff for being creative and for being resilient and bringing forward that other option. I also know that there's been some rhetoric from the dais around the process of selecting a new water yard facility being unnecessarily costly, and I absolutely agree with that. It is expensive to try to force something on the community that they made clear they did not want to proceed with, and that was harmful to them. And we could have saved lots of money over 10 years had we moved forward with an alternative location, which we're doing ultimately today. And that would have put us in a more efficient process of acknowledging the needs of our communities while also acknowledging the needs of the city. But that said, I think all of us saw the outcome of the state legislature this past session. It's very clear that we don't have a pathway or straight pathway forward with advancing the Roof Depot site that we're currently in a purchase agreement around. We know the state legislator failed to make good on their financial commitment, but I am proud that the residents around East Phillips did raise over $10 million to support their half of the bargain, and I really hope that the administration will come to the table and work with those residents so that we can ultimately complete that purchase agreement and make that transfer of the Roof Depot site into community ownership possible. And that said, I'm really happy that we're in some ways closing one chapter and hopefully again doing so with further collaboration with the community so that we can make their vision a reality as well. So thank you all.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion on this item? Seeing none, I will move this motion for approval. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? The ayes have it and the motion is carried. We have another item under discussion before we go into our addendum. It is related to the council's standing committees and its membership. The item is a resolution revising memberships and quorums of various committees and was continued to today's meeting as our previous committee meeting. I will first recognize Council President Payne.
Thank you, Vice Chair Chowdhury. As you all recall, this was originally brought forward in the last cycle. It was after Councilmember Ellison had indicated that he was going to be moving on to a fellowship and was going to still be engaged in the work, but wanted to notify me that he was not going to be able to be consistently able to participate in committees in person. And after consulting with the city clerk and kind of recalling members who rolled off the body last term, my original proposal was to just streamline the process and just reduce the number of members that in each of those committees so that we could have a cleaner management of quorum. Councilmember Vita had expressed a lot of concern around making sure that the north side was represented. We held this first cycle, and my hope was to be able to have deeper conversations with folks. That was during the Ward Week when the Annunciation School shooting happened, and obviously all of our attention was drawn elsewhere. I did get an opportunity to meet both with Councilmember Vita and Councilmember Ellison to talk about some of the challenges that we were trying to navigate, especially with north side representation. And I got a better understanding of Councilmember Ellison's continuing work that he is doing serving the north side right now, including continuing to work on policy and continuing to work along with his staff on addressing constituent concerns. And so I put together a motion today that reflected, and Councilmember Vita had very strongly expressed the importance of having north side representation. And Councilmember Ellison had expressed that he's very engaged with this work and is always going to be staying on top of what's happening in committee and reaching out to committee members. And so I brought forward a motion that just kept him as a member of the committee, but transferred the vice chair role to Councilmember Chowdhury so that we just knew that we had that reliable seat at that table. I see that Councilmember Vita has brought forward a motion to add her to the committees. The one thing that gives me pause is that after those conversations, a number of other council members had also reached out to me expressing their interest in joining some of these committees. And based on my original conversation with the clerk, this is kind of the sequence of events. Once you start changing committee assignments, there's a cascade of other things that may unfold, including appointments to outside bodies like the Transportation Advisory Board and any number of other roles. And so I was trying to streamline still how we move forward. So I've had those conversations with other council members who had expressed interest in these committee assignments and asked that they hold that back so that we could have a path forward. That now goes unresolved with what Councilmember Vita has brought forward. I still recommend moving forward with keeping Councilmember Ellison on these committees because he is still engaged in the work. But obviously, this is a choice up to the body. And so my recommendation would be to pass what I've brought forward or to at least forward this topic without recommendation so that we could try to get these issues resolved in the next couple of days.
Thank you, Council President Payne. I'll next recognize Councilmember Vita.
Thank you, Chair Chowdhury. I feel like the council president's recollection of what happened is disingenuous, and I just want to start by saying that I was blindsided by what was brought forward the last cycle in that Councilmember Ellison was going to be removed from committees and there was not going to be any representation from the North Side. That's what sparked me. I think that's unacceptable. I've had conversations with President Payne since he was appointed president about Northside representation on committees, and so I had another conversation. We met by teams on Friday, and he told me that he thought that it should just go back to its original state. And I will say that what was brought before us was said that we were doing exactly what we did for Councilmember Johnson. That is not factual. What we did for Councilmember Johnson is what I'm asking for here today. Councilmember Johnson was taken off committees and replaced by Councilmember Osman and replaced with chairs that he had been mentoring on those committees. That is what happened. That was unanimously voted on, and that is what I asked the council president to do in the case of Councilmember Ellison not being on these committees and not just removing him and not having Northside representation because we deserve that. I have talked to Councilmember Ellison. He is in support of me being appointed to these committees. He is in support of talking to me through these committees because we do it anyway, with him being assigned to the committees, issues that come up on the North Side. And so what I've brought before you today, colleagues, is more work for myself because I believe the North Side deserves to be represented on these committees. There's a lot of issues that come before the North Side and that are important to biz and important to public health and safety, and I want to be there to make sure that we are represented on the North Side and there's somebody from the North Side who can have conversations with folks about these things while they're in committee, and I asked the council president to support me in doing so. He had every opportunity to bring forward what I've brought forward as an amendment today, and he chose not to. He told me that he was going to go back to the original committee members with adding Ellison and that he would figure out if Councilmember Ellison would be here or not. Again, I spoke with Councilmember Ellison. He says he will be here Thursday to support me in being appointed to these committees, and I'm asking you all to do so now.
Thank you, Councilmember Vita. Next, I'll recognize Councilmember Osman.
Thank you, Chair. And first of all, Councilmember Ellison has served the city of Minneapolis for a long time. He's one of the seniors in the body here. He has been the vice chair of BIZ for I think the last 8 years. Before I became a chair, he was a vice chair for former Councilmember Lisa Goodman, and he's also vice chair here for me as BIZ committee. As you know, BIZ committee is very busy, he's very knowledgeable, and I appreciate the commitment and the service he has done for Northside, and he continues to do his work over there. It will be a big miss, not to have Ellison in the committee. He's been a champion for housing, for tenants' rights, and he continues to be that. I really, as a chair of this committee, I really want to have him. So maybe I'll ask City Clerk, is the virtual for him to stay a member an option for him to join us? I have heard, I don't know, I have heard even after the COVID, the state committees or boards have continue to do virtual. Don't have that information. That's what I heard. I don't really have super details, but if they stays doing it, state boards are doing virtual meeting, what's stopping us? Thank you.
Through the chair, Councilmember Osmond, there are a few points to keep in mind. First and foremost, council rules require that council members be present physically in the chamber in order to cast a vote, and no proxy voting is allowed. That would be one. The state law, open meeting law, was amended and changed last year to provide a more permissive use of interactive technology, as they refer to it in the statute, for the use of remote participation in public meetings. However, we here at the city do not have the processes or systems in order to meet what is required. So the statutes require that if you're using interactive technology, you must be able to see and hear all the participants at the same time. And so we don't have the system in place that would allow us for Councilmember Ellison on one end to see and hear every single one of the body here, and for us to see him at the same time, and for the public to be able to see and hear everybody in this room and Councilmember Ellison from any remote location. So there is a technological challenge that would prohibit us from fully complying with the state open meeting law, and then there are the council rules that say a council member must be present in the chamber in order to cast a vote.
Okay. Thank you so much for clarifying. That will be a big miss, and I wish there was a way for him to be and stay in base committee, the 6 meetings that we have left. But with that being said, like I said, BIS committee is very, very busy, and it's a committee that has a lot of items come through, and I would love to have someone, and I'm glad Councilmember Fita has offered her time to serve and join the committee, and I welcome that. But also, I really want to make sure, and hopefully I can get a commitment from her, that, I want to be able to advance policies that comes through the committee. I want, and this is what Councilmember Allison also wants, I want to forward policies and not kill in the committee, especially what happened last week with Councilmember Jason Chavez and Council Vice President. We need to be able to give opportunity and time for all council members, and if Councilmember Fita can commit publicly that she will be advancing policies that she might not agree without recommendation to the full council, I will welcome her, I will support her motion, and I really want, that, because that is something that I want to carry as a committee chair. I want to be able to give everyone an opportunity, even if you don't agree with some of the policies that come through it. So that's what I'm going to leave it, but I would love to have Councilmember Fita join on the BIS committee, if she's able to answer that question.
That's fraud. I'm not even sure what the question is, but if it's about my perfect attendance, I'll be at the BIS committee and I will work through the issues of BIS.
My question was,
100%.
will you support policies?
Let's go through the chair, please.
Yeah.
So I will take the chair. Why don't we have Clerk Carl take a stab at that question?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. And to Councilmember Osmond, I would say, obviously, as I've said before at previous meetings, this body gets to determine its structure. It has the exclusive power to decide its officers, its committees, the jurisdiction of those committees, the membership of those committees, including the leadership of those committees. And so it is a decision of this body which members are on the various committees. And there is no conditioning upon that service in terms of I will or I won't support things. Every single member here is given one vote, and they use that vote to represent their constituents in voting on all proposals that come before the body. And so every single one of our committees, as I've said before, we sometimes throw this term around that this is an oversight committee or this is a standing committee. All committees are standing committees. All committees exercise oversight of certain spheres of municipal policy within the jurisdiction of the city enterprise, and in exercising their duty of care as an elected official, that vote is what they use to represent not just their position, but the position of their wards as duly elected members of the body. So if it is the decision of this body that Councilmember Vita is to be substituted in for those assignments on committees that currently Councilmember Ellison serves on, then certainly that's a decision for this body, and it would be a majority vote to make that happen.
Thank you. So it feels like that question is asked and answered. Do you have any further comments, Councilmember Osman?
Just reiterate, my point is that I want to be able to have the opportunity for very important policies come through this committee that affect people's lives. And I want to be able to, consider that. And I don't really like to see, and I'll be honest with you, what happened last week. I don't agree the motion that was coming through for Councilmember Jason Chavez's motion on the policy, but I still was able to vote on that. So as the committee chair, that is my point, and we'll see how this turns out to be on the vote. But again, Councilmember Allison will be a big miss, and I look forward to whoever joins on this committee.
Thank you. I'll next recognize Councilmember Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I guess I thought this conversation was a different conversation. I thought it was the elephant that's in the room that I've been hearing from many of my constituents and other people around the city, other taxpayers, Ward 5 residents that feel like Councilmember Ellison's acceptance of a fellowship, which is a wonderful opportunity for him, is in conflict with his duties at the city of Minneapolis. And some people have suggested that it is an ethical concern, that he is collecting a paycheck from multiple sources. Yeah, I thought that was going to be the discussion today. It seems like we are not really concerned about that aspect. I guess, I went through a Harvard fellowship during my term in office, and they requested that I not do any work related to my city work, phone calls, emails, etc. And I read through the Loeb Fellowship, which I know many people who have been through that fellowship, many Minneapolitans who have been through the Loeb Fellowship, and they have all been required. I've read that Harvard has created an exception for Mr. Ellison, Councilmember Ellison.
Councilmember Jenkins, I unfortunately don't feel like Councilmember Ellison's fellowship in particular is germane to the discussion. Today we're discussing the committee standings, and also
I respectfully disagree. It is absolutely the reason why we're having this conversation. We would not be having this conversation if he has not doing a fellowship in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So I disagree, ma'am.
I'll just respectfully say
I am bringing this issue forward today.
He is unable to answer any of the questions that are being brought up here, and so I understand that it's related to the
questions are for this body. It is not up to Mr. Ellison. If we related this to past term, when Mr. Johnson took a job and he did not begin his work while he was on the city council. We also had this very same situation in the previous term. when Mr. Warsami, Councilmember Warsami at the time, took a job at the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority. He stepped down from his position. So I thought that's what this conversation was about. Clearly it is not. It's about the committee structure, which I 100% support Councilmember Vital's proposal to join the Biz Committee. But I think we need to have a real discussion about the efficacy of his fellowship versus his work here on the City Council.
Thank you, Councilmember Jenkins. And just a point of privilege, I'd agree with you that the fellowship certainly is the reason why we are in this position. However, the item is not about council members' ethics, and that's why it's not a part of the discussion. And that's where I felt.
I'm glad you let your constituents know that you are not concerned about this.
No ascribing motive, please.
You just said you don't care.
Madam Chair.
I will recognize Clerk Carl.
Thank you. Just to sort of reiterate where we are, and notwithstanding all the other discussions that have happened, we have 7 cycles left in this year and this term. And in order to reflect the will of the body, as I have mentioned to the council president a few times, getting these committees done is important. We have to reprogram our legislative information management system. That's going to cost money and take time. So not to put a fine point on it, but we have 7 cycles left, 6 regular council meetings. That includes this one on Thursday this week. And if we are to have the time needed and money to pay to reprogram limbs, we will need an action from the council soon, maybe even as early as Thursday. I will reframe for us that the council rules, 4.1, specifically say it's the council president's job to bring forward a recommendation for forming committees that it is then subject to a ratification vote by the council. So in this particular case, I would suggest you do have a proposal. It's in the form of a resolution amending the existing resolution which created our standing committees for this term. In front of you, the council president has expressed what his recommendation is. Councilmember Vital has also offered an amendment to that proposal, which would substitute her name in place of Councilmember Ellison's name on 2 of those committees, specifically the Business, Housing, and Zoning Committee and the Public Health and Safety Committee. And so I think the first thing to decide is, for the body, whether or not you will take up the amended version that has been requested by Councilmember Vital as a change to the proposal brought forward by the council president in line with the council rules.
Thank you. Next, I'll recognize Councilmember Cashman.
Thank you, Vice Chair Chowdhury. I'm also disappointed that Councilmember Ellison didn't communicate with us before his departure, and that we couldn't have worked this out before he didn't communicate with me. And so that came as information to me when he wasn't here in the council meeting where a new organizational structure was put forward. I was not informed that he was leaving the committee that I serve on, Biz, and that there would be a new vacancy on the Public Health and Safety Committee, which I have since let the president know that I would like to serve on in Councilmember Ellison's stead, because I have a legislative directive which we just passed earlier today for investigation and clearance rates policy work that I would like to move forward through that committee. So I'm not comfortable replacing both of his positions with Councilmember Vital when there are other folks who would like to serve in those capacities and advance policies in those committees as well. At this point, I think the best course of action is to leave the committees as they are and let him have the expectation, which is my expectation, that he attends as many of them as possible, which is what his residents and what his colleagues deserve. In that case, I'll move Payne's version, which keeps them all the same, with him on them, and say on the record here that he needs to be here, that us as council members and him and his Ward 5 constituents deserve a council member who shows up, so he should be showing up. Like you said, there's only 7 cycles left. Make the effort to be here. Do your fellowship after. That's my position and motion.
Second.
Councilmember Palmasan, I'll recognize you next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, to clear up speaker management, perhaps with some of the words from our city clerk, I will second the revision that Councilmember Vita is making to Councilmember Payne's motion. Does that make sense to this body? I thought she'd made that motion.
I don't believe a motion was made until Councilmember Cashman made a motion. Could the clerk just clarify for us?
Yeah, Madam Chair, my understanding there would be the original motion on the floor is Council Payne's revision, so it would be in order at this point for Councilmember Palmisano or Vita to move to amend that version. So then we would the body would vote on whether or not to accept Councilmember Vita's amendment, and then we would return to the original motion, either in its original form or as amended by this body.
So, Madam Chair, I'd like to make my motion to amend.
And it sounds like you would like to second.
I'll go ahead and second that.
Thank you.
Great. The motion is on the floor. Do you have any further comments?
I do. Thank you. This is germane to this motion, I believe. We have no representation from the north side on these two important committees, Business and Housing and also Public Safety. If Councilmember Ellison is being removed from those committees, the solution would be to appoint another member. Ideally, Councilmember Vita to these committees, not reduce membership and quorum of committees, and also not to leave it as is, which would mean that then this would be vacant per Councilmember Ellison's admissions himself. But this is about providing day-to-day, on-the-ground representation for Ward 5. Councilmember Ellison cannot do that from Massachusetts. He cannot effectively helicopter in once in a while to vote on important city issues. This is what an executive consultant does, not a sitting city council member. A neighbor of mine suggested, after watching some of the footage or reading some of the articles in the paper, that maybe he would get a couple city council jobs and string them together as a traveling gig. I think we all know how ridiculous that sounds. You cannot not be present and do this kind of a job. And I have heard, similar to Councilmember Cashman, from a lot of residents concerned that he's being paid to do both. To me, this is about council leadership, not taking the lead in managing this reassignment, because I only found out about it recently, that past cycle. And I am curious how long leadership has known about this. But this action is to not allow Councilmember Ellison to participate in council activities, but still collect a paycheck. And I don't think there are other city employees who are given that privilege. We once had to terminate employment of the best audit person I believe we ever had, because she moved her family to Kansas City when her husband got a job there. This was during COVID, when we were all working remotely. She could have done her job, but we let her go per our remote workforce policy. I get that doesn't apply to electeds, but it should. I think we should apply the same standards that we put on our workforce to ourselves in every instance that we can. I don't understand how Councilmember Ellison is contributing to the day-to-day operations of council if he's only present once in a while. The suggestion of taking the easy way out here, that's on council leadership. But to me, this shows a complete lack of regard for equitable representation across our entire city. But I must say that what feels just as disturbing is what I just heard another council member on the Land Use Committee say. The chair of that committee, in fact, just said he would invite and support her only if Councilmember Vita supports the things he wants her to. And that is a litmus test I've not heard of before.
Thank you, Councilmember Palmisano. Next on queue is Councilmember Vita.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say again that this is not a one-issue thing for me to be appointed to these committees. I just heard Councilmember Cashman speak to a legislative directive that is passed clearly without her being on committee. And that's not what this is about. This is not about me having a legislative directive that I want to get passed for why I want to be on these committees. This is about the North Side having representation and having someone that they can come to and talk about the many issues that are on these committees. There has been so many conversations about the work being done in committee. I believe that we deserve that. We deserve someone who is going to speak with folks and take the time to explain the things that are happening in these committees, the complexities, the folks who walk up to you during these meetings that are from the North Side, that want a North Sider to explain what just happened in the committee that they sat through, the folks who are watching from home that have multiple questions. And despite what Councilmember Cashman believes, she's not that person. She's not a North Sider. Councilmember Ellison and I have always worked together on these things. We've always had these conversations, despite what's happening now. We've always talked about the issues across committees. Both of our committees that we sit on one committee together. We discuss these things for the North Side, and we discuss how we're going to discuss them with the North Side. That is important. There is no reason why we shouldn't do it. And again, this whole conversation started because it was supposed to be a replication of what happened for Councilmember Johnson. And all I'm asking for everyone to do is exactly what we did for Councilmember Johnson. Replace the seats with someone else. And that someone just happens to be me because the North Side is not represented. That is it. That's all I'm asking for. I'm not asking for special favors. I'm not asking for anybody to, give me advice on how I should be or shouldn't be in the committee. I'm going to do my job in these committees like I've done in every other committee I've sat in. I'm going to continue to have conversations with Councilmember Ellison about what's important to and for the North Side, as we always do. Now, if we want to make this a personal thing, because it's starting to feel really personal to me, about me, if we want to make this a personal thing about I want to be on the committee instead of you, and people not understanding that the North Side is already underrepresented. There's only 2 of us here. I don't know how many Southsiders here. There's only 2 of us on this entire council. And to ask for 6 more cycles, the number of cycles were minimized to 6. I think that's a lot of cycles, especially for the North Side. For 6 more cycles for another North Sider to be on the committee so that I have an opportunity to discuss with North Siders what's happening, what's going on at the very complicated city council level about things in their community. Come on. Like, what else is needed here? It's clear what we have to do here. Now, people can vote however they want to, and people can make it about them, and they want to be on this. This legislative directive is passing already. So you can do that however you want to do it. But we don't have representation. And as I said, I've spoke to Councilmember Ellison. We've talked through this. We have a plan. If you all want to text them or call them, I'm sure some have already, do so. But we deserve representation. Period.
Next, I'll recognize Council President Payne.
Thank you, Vice Chair Chowdhury. 2 things. I think all of us recognize this isn't a 9-to-5 job. Our time on the dais is some of the most important work we do, but from a time perspective, we are a 24/7 role. When a school shooting happens, we are on the phone. When you're walking your neighborhood, you are answering questions about rental licenses. There is not really a moment off. And so the boundaries of what we do day to day probably are a little bit unhealthy, I would say, in terms of our time commitment. I would suggest that today, if we want to take action, we pass my motion, because as I said, there are other members that are interested in these positions. Councilmember Cashman shared publicly, but there are other members interested. We would have to quickly start reshuffling a lot of roles here to try to make sure that we're getting to the right geographic equity, economic equity, demographic equity. It's a very delicate balance of all of those forces. Otherwise, I would suggest that we forward this without recommendation so that we can take this up at full council, because there has been some ideas around how we might arrive at that balanced place, and that I think would at least give us the time to do that.
Next, we'll recognize Councilmember Rainville.
I remember vividly how we allowed Councilmember Johnson's seats to be replaced by Councilmember Osmond, so that that representation is safe. This is the same thing that Councilmember Vita is asking for. We have to be equitable to the north side. And I would ask Councilmember Vita, are you amenable to having this forward without recommendation so we could get Councilmember Ellison here to get his opinion?
Sure. Whatever. I mean, I really do, Councilmember Rainville. I really would like us to vote on this. I mean, people, this was literally thrown at us 3 weeks ago, and people were ready to vote. And there were no conversations had. I'm still waiting on the question to be answered by council leadership. How long have they known about this? I mean, what is the weight here? The council president has thrown everyone under the bus, the clerks, Ellison, everyone. How long have we been waiting for this, and now we're going to recommend that it gets delayed instead of taking a vote?
Well,
So, just to clarify, you asked a question about if you were amenable to making your motion be without recommendation. And Councilmember Vita, did you accept that?
I said no. I want to vote on my motion.
Okay. All right, Councilmember Rain, would you like to continue?
Yes, I would. Thank you. I really do think that if we move forward without recommendation, let Councilmember Ellison come and express his views on having the north side be represented and support your position. I do think that's the best way to go forward today. So I will second Council President Payne to move forward without recommendation.
All right, clerks, why don't we get this in order?
Chair Chowdhury, the Vita's amendment is before the body now, and it sounds like the entire body would need to agree to pull it, and it does not sound like there is that agreement.
Why don't we
So
check in
I
on
think
that?
we probably need to vote on the amendment.
I will ask Councilmember Vita if she is willing to withdraw her amendment, so Councilmember Payne, Council President Payne, and Councilmember Rainville can make that motion of forwarding without recommendation.
You can vote on my amendment.
So that's a no.
That's a
So
no.
then Councilmember Vita's amendment is before us. Next, I will recognize Councilmember Chavez.
Thank you, Chair Chowdhury. I'd just like to bring attention, as we're talking about equity, I started analyzing the council structure, and I realized that the Business, Housing, and Zoning Committee is actually represented by 3 council members that represent at least part of downtown. And as we're looking at the council structure, I think we need to analyze deeply what representation means when we have one of the most important committees of this body that talks about business, housing, and zoning reform, and we have downtown representing 50% of the committee. Then we completely need to restructure the committee and figure out what we're going to do to make sure that we're being equitable. I want to point that out. And I'm hearing about so much finger pointing to Council President Payne, but I want to remind the public last council term, which was led by a different council president and a different council vice president. In the Public Health and Safety Committee, there was no one from Phillips or the Southside Green Zone represented in that committee. That committee was Vita as chair, Payne as vice chair, Wansley, Rainville, Ellison, and Palmisano. And that question about equity was not talked about last term, and I was frustrated too. So I want to talk about how it's hard to have this conversation when some folks, I guess, don't matter in this conversation. But if we're going to be restructuring our committee structure, let's start with biz that's reflected with 50% of folks from downtown. And let's address that concern there too. So I believe in equity, but I think if we're going to be equitable, we need to be fair through all the committees. Thank you.
Next, I'll recognize Councilmember Osmond.
Yes, I support Councilmember Rainville's suggestion. I think it's really smart to have Councilmember Ellison, not speak for him, he's still at the office, his staff are here, he's coming tomorrow. He did not sign off like Johnson did, he's still here. So, the brilliant idea that you brought, thank you, Councilmember Rainville, I support that, and I'm hoping that that's what we will vote for, so we can have Councilmember Ellison come in and join us. He has done a lot of work for City of Minneapolis for the last 8 years, and he's someone who is super experienced in biz committee. So we'd love to have his opinion and what he thinks on how to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Osman. I put myself in queue throughout the duration of this conversation. For me, I will just speak for myself. I don't personally feel like I have a consensus on what to do here. I think some may feel that I have one position or another. I truly, after this conversation, do not. I think the point about equity that Councilmember Chavez brought up, about 50% of the Biz Committee being represented by downtown council members, is really well taken. It's just a matter of fact. It is. That's a factual statement that we have before us. And I agree that there should be Northside representation also on this committee. I would welcome Councilmember Vita being on this, but I don't think the amendment that's before us has a reflection of that equity issue that Councilmember Chavez named. And so if we want to do equity across the board, and that's something that it sounds like we care about as a body, then we should structure the Business Housing and Zoning Committee to do so. And I don't know if the Councilmember Vita, who's the author of this amendment, wants to make a suggestion to change it, or if we should just take this up into full council, and then Council President Payne brings another version, or other people bring amendments to that day. That might be the thing that we need to do. But personally, I am not at a consensus point as to what we should do here without a discussion about the restructure of the Business Housing and Zoning Committee. And so I just wanted to put that on the table for us to discuss further if other members had any suggestions or ideas to that point. Next, I will recognize Councilmember Vita.
Thank you, Chair. Again, can we get the answer to the question, though, of how long has council leadership known that we were going to need to restructure these committees, or that Councilmember Ellison wasn't going to be here? I mean, the proposal that came before us was to just eliminate the membership of Councilmember Ellison from these committees. So I'm trying to understand, how long has this been an issue for council leadership? Or when were they made aware of this?
You want to? Okay, so I will let Council President Payne or Council Vice President step in and decide who wants to address it.
I'll first speak from my perspective, because I think that led ultimately to my conversation with the clerk. My recollection is that Councilmember Ellison had shared with me his interest in this program many, many months ago, but I hadn't had any follow-up conversations with him about whether he was applying, whether he got accepted, or any of those types of logistical details, until essentially the week before the original motion came back. And immediately when I discovered that he was accepted and he was going to be starting the program, I went to the clerk's office and we had a conversation about what would be the best path forward. So that's from my perspective.
So a week before, I'm just trying to get, I didn't understand that answer,
Okay,
Madam Chair.
go ahead and follow.
So a week before the action that the clerk brought before us is when you found out?
That he was actually formally accepted and that he was starting the program, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay, now I will recognize Council Vice President Chugtai.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Vita, a couple things. First, I can't remember exact dates. We had, me and Councilmember Ellison spoke in person. I'm sure he also made you aware that he was potentially pursuing a a prestigious opportunity. He made me aware when he was applying. I believe him and I had a conversation once he learned he was accepted into the program, just to talk about how that would affect his schedule. And I believe that myself, the council president, and the city clerk had a conversation, a couple of council meetings ago, just around, hey, this is coming up. We should start figuring out what the impact on committee structure is going to be. There were, I think there was a conversation around the exact can of worms that's now open with, several members wanting to move around committee structure. And so at the time, the council president brought forward a motion, as you recall, to just eliminate council member Ellison's committee assignments and leave those spaces vacant and reduce the membership down to 5 members. Now, I just want to clarify, just in case this isn't being tracked correctly here, the resolution from Council President Payne that's before you today leaves Councilmember Ellison on the committees he's a part of, which is informed by, Councilmember Ellison just mentioning his interest in staying on committees and wanting to be present whenever he is able to, and hopefully that answers your question.
Kind of, but I did have a meeting with Council President Payne on Friday, who said something completely different than what he's saying today. He told me he didn't know, that he knew the day that I knew when that action, with his name on it, came before us, that he had no idea the clerk was bringing that forward on that day. That is exactly what he said to me. He told me he had no idea that was coming before us on that day, that he thought maybe it would come at a later date. I am going to recommend that we move this forward without recommendation, because I would love for Councilmember Ellison to be here to have a conversation about that part, because that part is not truthful. And what there is like major discrepancies in what the council president said to me versus what he is saying up on this dais right now, and definitely in the language that he's using around the action he brought forward versus what I'm bringing forward, and why I brought it forward. Why I brought it forward is because he said he'd rather see Council Member Ellison stay on it, and hadn't said anything about Council Member Ellison wanting to stay on it. So I am going to recommend that we move it forward without recommendation until Council Member Ellison is here.
We'll get back to the clerks on how we should do that, but first, President Payne has a point of order.
If there was a point of clarification, what we had discussed on Friday was that me and the clerk had a conversation on what our path to move forward would be, and I think we had finalized that conversation on the Monday before the cow. I had assumed that we wouldn't take that item up until the next cycle, but we happen to have a very hardworking clerk who was able to get that onto our agenda the very next day.
What?
So I'm going to ask our city clerks to help us figure out how we should move forward on moving this without a recommendation as a body.
Madam Chair, if there's no objection, we can simply just close the speaker management column with Councilmember Vital's amendment, and then we can move back to the original proposal and accept a motion to send that forward without recommendation.
Great. If there is no objection, that's what we can have at the table. Okay, no objection, so that's what's before us. I will ask do we have others in queue? Councilmember Rainville, are you in queue?
No.
Okay. Just have an old queue before us. Are there others that are in queue, just so I can make sure I'm not missing anybody?
I will just formally move that we forward this without recommendation and ask for a second.
Second.
Great. I will have the clerk call the roll.
On the motion to send the item forward without recommendation, Councilmember Payne.
Aye.
Wansley.
Aye.
Rainville.
Aye.
Vita.
Aye.
Osman.
Aye.
Cashman.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Nay.
Chuktai.
Aye.
Koski.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Vice Chair Chowdhury.
Aye.
Chair Chavez.
Aye.
There are 11 ayes and 1 nay.
That motion carries. It has been forwarded without recommendation. Colleagues, next we have 2 addendums that were added this morning as a result of tech issues at our IGR committee meeting. First, we will have Lauren Olson come back and conclude her update regarding the federal level legislative update. Feel that this is rather important given our current climate at the federal level to hear fully what our IGR department has to share. And then I will remind folks, we do have another item that we will need to vote on following this presentation.
All right, Madam Chair, council members, I'm Lauren Olson, Senior Government Relations Representative from the IGR Committee. I know it's been a very long day. If anyone wants to stretch, I won't take offense to it. And I will also try to get through this expeditiously, but we do want to make sure you have the information. So the focus today is the federal budget process. We did discuss this earlier in IGR committee, so I won't go over this in detail, but the fiscal year ends on September 30th. And so there's active discussion happening right now about the budget. The normal budget process requires that, or 60 votes in the Senate to bring a budget to the floor.
Ms. Olson?
Yes.
You are able to proceed from the slide that you ended because captioning is available. So I believe you were in the big picture portion when we ended off.
Thank you.
Yes.
I won't. I don't intend to repeat everything, but I do want to generally remind folks of a couple of things here. But I'll
of course
expeditiously move forward. So yes, this is going to be an active discussion over the next month. So we want you to be aware of it. Some bills are, each bill is passed through a committee and then they're put together in big omnibus. So these bills are at different stages and within the House and the Senate. So when we talk about some of these numbers coming up, just be aware that it might be something that's passed through a subcommittee, it might be through a House, a few bills have actually passed through the floor. We won't discuss this in detail again, but the big thing that's hanging over people's heads, especially Democrats in Congress, is that they're concerned that once they appropriate money expressing their priorities, that their power of the purse basically will not be respected. And that because there's these tools that have been used that essentially end up changing the appropriations after the fact with a simple majority. So that's the big thing overhanging the discussion, is how can Democrats actually have meaningful appropriations when all these tools are being used? Okay, the big picture is basically that the White House is generally proposing, of course, the biggest draconian cuts. The House is often aligned with the White House, sometimes a little bit less in terms of cuts. And the Senate process, on the other hand, has been a much more bipartisan process, and you will find that in many cases, they're kind of maintaining funding levels. Sometimes they're not keeping up with inflation, occasionally even increase funding. So we'll see this as we look at some examples. So with emergency management, the White House would cut. The House actually, surprisingly, was a big surprise to me with the budget, would increase FEMA by $4.5 billion. That is surprising since, there's been a lot of active conversation, especially from the administration, about potentially eliminating or dramatically changing FEMA. So that was a surprise to me because, as you'll see going forward, the House is often pretty in step with the president. The Senate budget is not available yet, but expected tomorrow. In the meantime, there's also a bill that's being actively discussed that has bipartisan sponsorship, calling the Fixing Emergency Management for America, I think. And so I'm engaging with our Emergency Management Department about their thoughts on that bill, and we can talk to our delegation about that. In the public safety realm, just generally, the White House is trying to reduce funding for the Department of Justice, and they want to eliminate grant programs, many of them targeted towards violent crime prevention programs. The Senate would reduce the budget slightly. and the House would increase the budget slightly. Both the House and the Senate do increase funds for the COPS program and burn grants, which are both programs that we have used at the city. Public health is a realm that is, seeing basically some of the deepest cuts proposed from the White House and the House. The House would cut $7 billion from total HHS spending. The Senate would actually increase the amount. House would cut CDC. Senate would maintain. Surprisingly, the House and Senate are both supporting National Institutes of Health funding at 2025 levels. That's somewhat surprising since we've seen NIH, kind of attacked in the past. The House provides $100 million for the Make America Healthy Again project. Senate does not. The House is proposing a nearly $1 billion cut from programs that work with AIDS and tuberculosis and other transmitted diseases. Most of that $1 billion is cutting from HIV prevention programs, and that's also a proposal consolidates programs that are funded with this. There's also a Ryan White HIV AIDS grant program that is administered here by Hennepin County. That program is proposed to be cut by $500 million in the House. In the realm of K through 12 education, the White House basically wants to transform the way that public education is carried out. So they would cut the Department of Education by $12 billion. They would consolidate a lot of programs, but in the process of consolidating these programs and creating a block grant, it would reduce the funding also in the process by 70%. The White House and the House share some goals as far as like increasing money to go to charter schools. They would eliminate English language acquisition programs. The House is suggesting a very large cut to Title I funding, which helps schools with a high number of low-income students. That's some significant cuts proposed there. The Senate, on the other hand, is rejecting all of those changes to Title I and to English language acquisition programs, and they generally maintain or increase funding. So we're starting to see a pattern here where the Senate has quite different opinions about what the budget should be. Just a high-level look at the housing realm. So, again, House cutting nearly $1 billion compared to 2025. The Senate would increase by $3 billion compared to 2025. Community development block grants, which the city certainly utilizes to help provide affordable housing, is something that we've been keeping an eye on, and there's been a lot of discussion about and threats against potentially eliminating that program. The White House would like to eliminate CDBG. The House actually maintains the same amount for 2025, so again, somewhat surprising since they often agree with the president. Senate number is just about the same, but it's $200 million less. In the area of like rental assistance and HUD, the House would cut public housing by $1.5 billion. The House committee that has considered this, their cuts would result in 411,000 fewer people getting housing choice vouchers. Senate cuts would result in 243,000 people receiving vouchers. Part of the reason why, in a way, the Senate needs to account for like increasing costs and increasing demand for these programs. So in some cases, they're not necessarily dramatically cutting their budget, but they're not keeping up with the needs of these programs. The president, again, would replace housing assistant type of programs, consolidate them, create a block grant program, and then that whole process would result in 43% less funding overall. Again, you're seeing some common themes as far as the White House wanting to create block grants and also significantly reducing the appropriation in the process. In the realm of Homeland Security, I think we've seen before from other bills the direction certainly that the House is going, despite the fact that they have increased funding in the reconciliation bill also for related to immigration enforcement. They are proposing additional increases in the 2026 budget over 2025. So another $1 billion for ICE, $6.4 billion for total for enforcement and removal operations, so, but an increase of more than 600 million, 500 million increase to custody operations. There's currently a program that provides shelter to migrants that they would eliminate. There are also, the House would propose to eliminate a bunch of other programs too, such as the Office of Legislative Affairs and the Office of Immigration Detention Ombudsman. And I think that those are tools that we would use to get information about people in detention, for example. So that's concerning. Again, the Senate bill is not available, but we're expecting to potentially see that marked up tomorrow. So I expect what came out of the Senate to look very, very different. So we have these very different visions. And then just kind of some other random items that are just of interest to the city is the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund does support projects across the state and city, water projects, and the president wants to cut that very significantly. The House wants to cut it more moderately, and the Senate would keep that steady. The LIHEAP program is something we've discussed before, and I think we're all very concerned about potential cuts to that to provide heating and cooling to low-income residents. The president would like to eliminate that, but the Senate and the House are both kind of just adjusting it a little bit. So it's encouraging to see some things like support for CDBG, support for LIHEAP. So if there's any bright spots, that might be it. Finally, if Congress does choose to include their earmark appropriations, we do have a project that is in the House and Senate bills right now, and so that is for $250,000 would support Logan Park rail crossing improvements in Northeast Minneapolis. The original request was for $1.8 million, so it would have been nice to receive a more full funding, but we have potential to receive some support for that project. So in conclusion, we'll be watching how this all plays out. What we discussed earlier at IGR committee is all these interesting dynamics around Democrats especially trying to figure out how to make sure their appropriations will be respected, because there's a whole bunch of tools that the White House has been using that allow them to either come back later and amend the budget with a simple majority or withhold funds. And so they're trying to navigate what to do. So by September 30th, we will either have a new budget, some kind of continuing resolution, or a government shutdown. So we will be watching. Are there any questions?
Thank you so much, Lauren, for this really informative presentation. Members, are there any questions for Ms. Olson? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to ask the clerk to file that report, and thank you so much. We have one item left. The final item is two-parted. It's a formal receipt of a letter that was drafted by me, President Payne, Councilmember Kosicki, and Councilmember Palmisano that was sent to Governor Walz. And additionally, we have a resolution that was added to our IGR agenda this morning calling on the Minnesota State Legislature to ban assault weapons, high-capacity magazines, require safe storage of firearms, and give local governments authority to enact local gun control legislation. Just teeing up what that letter was, that is in the LIMS file for you to view, and also for the public. Essentially, I think our IGR director did a good job of teeing up how Governor Walz had signaled that he was interested in doing a special session. In response to that, me and my council authors wrote a letter expressing gratitude for Governor Walz's action, moving towards action after the tragic shooting at Annunciation Church and School, and also urging him to call a special session to pass stronger gun control laws that are similar to the ones that we are asking for within the resolution. And then the resolution before you talks about that, but also highlights the other mass shooting that happened in Minneapolis less than 24 hours before the mass shooting at Annunciation Church and School at the 2900 block of Clinton Avenue near Cristo Rey Jesuit High School. I know that we are all in deep grief, and I thank Councilmember Palmisano and Councilmember Koski for their efforts and the way that they have been representing and addressing matters in their communities. I know that there will be a lot more to say at full council, and I do want to just open up the floor to folks to speak to this item. I also, before I do that, I had some discussions with a couple other colleagues. If it is without objection, I would like to add every council member to this resolution as an author.
Second.
There's no objection. All right, I will look to the queue. I believe first up is Councilmember Cashman.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask to be a co-author on this, so you definitely got ahead of me on that. But I think this should be, our collective priority number one right now. This summer for gun violence citywide has been awful, including in Loring Park, with many fatal and non-fatal shootings that have just really gone. It's been really difficult to investigate and to find closure and resolution on these horrible, horrible shootings. And obviously Annunciation was just awful for our entire community. And so I think it's important that City of Minneapolis council members take a position collectively and push our governor to call a special session and to make Republicans answer for why they don't want to pass gun reform. And take a vote on passing these gun control measures statewide. And if they can't pass that, then allow us to do it here in cities of the first class, like Minneapolis. So thank you to the authors for your work on putting this together.
Thank you. Next, I'll recognize Council President Payne.
Thank you, Chair Chowdhury, and thank you for your leadership on this. And I also want to thank the leadership of Councilmember Koski, Councilmember Palmisano. Thank you, Councilmember Cashman. Also, we were all at Annunciation on the day of the event, and it was a very, just really heart-wrenching experience. But I'm grateful is not the right word because I don't want to be here, frankly. But we are here, and I'm glad that we are putting at least what little push forward that we can through our official channels. So thank you.
Is there anyone else? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone else. I know that there will be more to say at full council. And I know that this is just a part of what we need to do strategically to get some necessary law change so we can ensure that we're putting a stop to gun violence in our city. So with that, this is before us for approval. So on that motion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Abstentions. That motion carries. And with that, we've concluded all business to come before the committee today. And hearing no objection, I will declare this meeting adjourned.